Chapter 3085. Prince Lian was so confident. It wasn't because he had recovered from his injuries that he was confident of defeating Lin Shui. It was because the 4 Imperial Palace Masters had sent out a message to gather all the Imperial Palace Masters and Imperial Guards. Prince Lian's divine sense detected that a dozen teams were rushing over within a radius of 20,000 miles. There were more than 20 Imperial Palace Masters and more than 800 Imperial Guards in the dozen teams. In 100 breaths, these masters would complete the encirclement. By then Ji Tianqing, Lin Shui and the others would not be able to escape. Lin Shui and Ji Tianqing also sensed that something was wrong and released their divine sense to check the situation. Immediately, the two of them also sensed that the dozen teams were approaching. The situation was very dangerous. Lin Shui didn't waste any more time. She shouted to the empty sky, "Break through the encirclement and cover Tianqing to leave this place." As her voice trailed off, 3 figures suddenly appeared behind the 4 Imperial Palace Masters. One of the figures was a ball of crimson light without a body. It was the Vice Sect Master Blood Illusion God. The other 2 were no strangers to Ji Tianqing. They were the left emissary Jin and the right emissary of the Blood Dragon. The 3 of them had been hiding for a long time. They suddenly appeared and launched a surprise attack on the 4 Imperial Palace Masters. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A few divine powers and secret arts were unleashed instantly. Bright crimson light filled the sky. The attention of the 4 Imperial Palace Masters was focused on Lin Shui and Ji Tianqing. Caught off guard, the 4 of them were hit by the divine powers and secret arts. They screamed in agony. Bang, bang, bang. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The 4 of them were severely injured and flew backward. Blood rained down from the sky. Lin Shui also held the demon blade and attacked Prince Lian with all her might. Sky edge slash. She waved the crimson blade and a crimson light covered the sky. It turned into a 1,000-foot crimson blade and slashed at Prince Lian. Prince Lian's divine soul was locked and the space within 100 miles was sealed. There was no way for him to escape. He could only wave his divine spear and use all his strength to block the attack. Bang! A deafening muffled explosion resounded through the sky. The 1,000-foot fiery dragon spear shadow was smashed into pieces by the crimson blade. Even the prince was sent flying backward, rolling and smashing into a mountain peak 100 miles away. The 1,000-meter-tall mountain was smashed into pieces, sending earth and rocks flying all over the sky. Peef! After struggling for a while, he shook off countless rocks and soil and flew out of the ruins. However, as his injuries worsened, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and his footsteps staggered. Damned lowly servant! Prince Lian was so angry that he was about to go crazy. He cursed in a cold tone. He channeled his power to suppress his injuries and regained his composure. Holding the spear, he flew into the sky and attacked Shui Lin. The surrounding teams were getting closer and closer. He only needed to hold on for a few more breaths before Ji Tianqing, Shui Lin, and the others would be surrounded. At that time, not only would he kill Ji Tianqing, but he would also kill Zhen Hong and Lin Shui. Of course, Shui Lin knew this. Therefore, after sending Grand Prince Lian flying, she did not follow up with another attack. He was not greedy for merit, nor did he have any extravagant hopes of killing Prince Lian. She did not forget her purpose, which was to save Ji Tianqing. Therefore, she covered Zhen Hong and Ji Tianqing and fled to the south. Swoosh! Without hesitation, Zhen Hong burst out with his fastest speed, like lightning streaking across the sky. Shui Lin, Blood Illusion God, Gold Left Emissary, and Blood Dragon Right Emissary were all guarding Ji Tianqing. Everyone worked together and pressed forward with indomitable will. Prince Lian was unwilling to give up. He waved his spear and chased after them. However, as soon as he got close, Shui Lin intercepted him and sent him flying back with a slash. He was very tenacious. Enduring his injuries, he attacked again, vowing to stall Ji Tianqing, Shui Lin and the others. However, Shui Lin, Gold Illusion God and Gold Left Emissary joined forces and attacked him head-on. This time, Prince Lian's ending was even more miserable. Not only was he sent flying hundreds of miles away, but he was also severely injured and spat out blood. His entire body was a bloody mess. His strength was further weakened and he could no longer compete with Shui Lin. If he continued to fight, his body would very likely be destroyed by Shui Lin's demonic blade. At that time, the loss would be too great. Prince Lian could only suppress his anger and unwillingness as he watched Ji Tianqing, Shui Lin and the others escape. Bastard. You're lucky this time. I'll kill you sooner or later. Grand Prince Lien stood in the sky and roared with an ashen face as he watched the group leave at lightning speed. Ji Tianxing and the others had escaped 5,000 miles away. They encountered two teams of palace masters who were crazily charging at them. Ji Tianxing quickly attacked. He waved the Burial of Heaven sword and slashed out an overwhelming sword light. Zhenhong Shuelin, Blood Illusion God, and the others also used their unique divine powers to counterattack. The battle was about to start. The divine powers and secret arts released by the two sides collided violently in the sky. Bang bang bang. Boom boom boom. Earth-shattering explosions and deafening noises reverberated endlessly between heaven and earth. Although there was a lot of noise, the battle only lasted for 3 breaths before it was over. Ji Tianxing, Shuelin, and the others were much stronger than the two teams of palace masters. The two sides only exchanged one blow and the divine powers of the palace masters were defeated. By the time Ji Tianxing and the others launched their second attack, the Imperial Palace experts were already injured and were forced to retreat with blood dripping from their wounds. When they used the third blow, the two teams of palace masters were severely injured and most of their divine bodies were destroyed. They spilled blood all over the sky, leaving behind a large pile of broken limbs as they fled in a sorry state. Ji Tianxing, Zhenhong, and the others continued to fly south. After a while, 3 more teams of palace guards surrounded Ji Tianxing and the others. The strength of these imperial guards was even worse. However, they had the advantage in numbers. There were more than 300 of them and they looked powerful. However, after the two sides engaged in close combat, the imperial guards were defeated in just one exchange. Shuelin was the most valiant. She took the lead with the demon sword and charged forward bravely. She was like a ball of dark red blood light, sweeping up a destructive hurricane of death in the sky. Once the palace guards came into contact with the hurricane, they were shredded into pieces by the blood-red sword light. Even their divine personas were on the verge of collapse. The group charged forward and tore the 3 teams of palace guards into pieces. They charged out of the encirclement fiercely. They were invincible and unstoppable. Not long after, the group flew for more than 10,000 miles and there were no more obstacles in front of them. The 20 teams of palace masters and palace guards finally arrived at the battlefield and gathered together. However, they could not complete the encirclement. They could only watch as Ji Tianxing and the others broke through the encirclement and left. In anger and unwillingness, the palace masters and palace guards chased after them with all their might. However, their flying speed was much slower than Ji Tianxing and the others. They could not be mentioned in the same breath. After chasing for more than 20,000 miles, they were more than 10,000 miles away and lost track of Ji Tianxing and the others. No matter how helpless they were, they could only stop chasing and look at the horizon and sigh. Under such circumstances, they could only report to the palace and ask for instructions on the next step of the plan and action. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 3086. One day later, Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui and the rest left King City. In the beginning, there were many Sir God experts from King City who chased after them with a large group of experts. As time went by, those people were shaken off. Now the experts from Royal City had long lost track of their whereabouts and news. Even if they were still searching for the whereabouts of the crowd in the vicinity of the capital, it would be of no use. Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui and the rest had checked and there was no danger within 30,000 miles. Only then did everyone heave a sigh of relief and relax. The night was cold and the starry sky was dark. At the border of King City and Linfeng County in a lofty mountain range, Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, Zhenhong and the rest stood on the peak of a mountain, facing the cold night wind and discussing something important. The 3-foot-long blood-red devil saber had shrunk 100 times. It had become a 3-inch-long delicate knife and Lin Shui was playing with it between her fingers. She stared at Ji Tianxing and asked solemnly, "Boy, what are you going to do next? We are in the same boat and are the public enemies of Bloody Flame Holy Kingdom. In this divine kingdom there is no place for us to stay. From tonight onwards are we going to run away?" Ji Tianxing looked at her and said with a playful smile, "What's wrong? Do you regret it now that your impulsiveness has worn off?" Lin Shui stared at him and said with a scornful smile, "Are you looking down on me? Do I look like an impulsive and reckless person? This is a decision I made after careful consideration. I am 100% sincere to you, but you dare to doubt me?" It's good that you don't regret it. Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. He looked at Sir God Blood Illusion Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon Right Emissary and asked, "What about you? Do you regret it?" Sir God Blood Illusion and Blood Dragon Right Emissary shook their heads and said with a smile, "Of course not. We will follow you wherever you go." Left Emissary Jean hurriedly shook his head and said firmly, "It is our dream and honor to be able to follow a genius expert like young Master Tianheng and do great things." Ji Tianxing's smile deepened. He glanced at Xuelin and asked the three, "Did you guys do this willingly or were you forced by her?" "Humph." Lin Shui snorted and stared at him again. Sir God Blood Illusion Blood Dragon and Left Emissary Jean quickly waved their hands and explained in unison, "You are joking. Of course we are willing." Ji Tianxing nodded and said seriously, "Good. I don't care if you are sincere or not, I will take it seriously. I hope you will remember what you said tonight. Don't regret or complain in the future. From now on we are on the same side of the same family. And I will tell you the plan's plan." Of the four peoples as Left Emissary and Emissary, Left Emissary Jean and Left Emissary Jean smiled. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing expectantly and listened to his plan. Ji Tianxing said solemnly, "It will be difficult for us to stay in the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom any longer. However, we are not in a hurry to leave. My injuries are quite serious, so I need to find a place to hide and recuperate for a while. After I recover to my peak condition, I still have a few things to deal with before I can bring all of you out of the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom. As for the future, I may go to the Great Yan Empire to do something more important." Hearing this, Xuelin frowned. Her clear eyes were filled with confusion. "Hey, are you crazy? You already have a death feud with Prince Lian. How dare you go to the Great Yan Empire? Aren't you walking into a trap? If I were you, I would leave the Great Yan Empire as soon as possible after recuperating." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and explained, "There are more than 10 kingdoms under the Great Yan Empire. Their territory is too big, so I can't leave in a short time. Moreover, the Great Yan Empire is more powerful and they might have something I want. Even if I offended Prince Lian, he is a sinner of the Great Yan Empire. The Emperor has the final say in the Great Yan Empire. Even the prince can't do anything to me." Zhenhong nodded and said firmly, "I'll follow young master's orders and decisions. I just want to stay by young master's side and fulfill my duty as a maid." Lin Shui glanced at her and waved her hand disapprovingly. She said to Ji Tianxing, "All right, I know you will be stubborn. I won't persuade you anymore. Anyway, I only have friends. I don't have any relatives or family. It's the same wherever I go. You make the decision. We'll go wherever you say." Since Lin Shui had made the decision, Shui Huan, Shui Long and Envoy Jean would follow without any objections. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "It's decided. We will go to Linfeng County now and sneak into Slanted Wind City secretly." Lin Shui looked puzzled again and asked, "Slanted Wind City? That place is not far from here. There will be a lot of powerful people searching for that place. Why are you going there? Could it be that you've prepared a backup plan and arranged for people to pick us up in Slanted Wind City?" Ji Tianxing thought for a while and said with a smile, "I guess so." "What do you mean by, I guess so? Are you sure?" Lin Shui mumbled as she took out the pitch-black godly ship. This godly ship with a ferocious appearance and gloomy aura was Lin Shui's ship. This was a monarch-level upper-grade godly ship. When it was at full speed, it was as fast as Ji Tianxing's flying speed. Everyone boarded the godly ship. Under the control of Envoy Jean and Right Envoy Xuelong, it flew across the night sky at lightning speed. Swoosh! The godly ship turned into a streak of black light and sped across the night sky, heading straight for Slanted Wind City. Inside the godly ship, Ji Tianxing, Zhenhong, Lin Shui, and Shui Huan sat in the spacious hall. Seeing that Ji Tianxing had no intention of going into seclusion, Lin Shui could not help but ask, "It will take at least 3 days to get to Slanted Wind City from here. Your injuries are so serious. What are you doing here instead of going to the secret room to heal?" Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said slowly, "Even if I have to go into seclusion to heal, I'm not in a hurry. Let's talk about you first. What have you been doing all this time? How did you find me?" Seeing that his injuries were stable and did not worsen, Lin Shui did not rush him to heal. Since Ji Tianxing wanted to chat with her, she said, "After we separated, I went back to the Blood Blade sect to arrange the disbanding of the sect. After a few days, the situation was settled. Shui Huan and I left the sect first and came to Monarch City to find you. We left all the trivial matters to Shui Long and Envoy Jin. Originally, I should have arrived at Monarch City 7 days ago. But on the way I could not help but take Lin Shan's godhead. After taking my revenge there was no point in keeping his godhead, so I refined it. Chapter 3087. Only after breaking through to the 8th level Divine Lord realm did Lin Shui set off for the capital. When she arrived at the capital, the Divine Blood ceremony had already ended. Ji Tianxing had already made a name for himself in the arena competition and won the crown. At that time he, Zhenhong, and the rest entered the Blood Flame mystic realm and were receiving the baptism of the sacred tree. When Lin Shui learned of this news, she also felt gratified and proud of Ji Tianxing. But she kept feeling that things might not go so smoothly. After Ji Tianxing entered the Blood Flame mystic realm, he would most likely cause some big trouble. It just so happened that Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon Right Emissary also finished handling matters and rushed to the capital to meet up with her. She sent the 2 emissaries to inquire about the news and understand Ji Tianxing's actions in the capital. In a short 2 days she inquired about the previous matters clearly. And at this time, Ji Tianxing had already seized the sacred tree and destroyed the Blood Flame mystic realm. He fled the capital and was pursued by the monarch, 2 princes and a large number of imperial guards. When Lin Shui received the news and chased out of the capital, she was already 15 minutes late. Therefore she did not catch up to Ji Tianxing all along. Only at the critical moment when Prince Lian was chasing Ji Tianxing did she arrive in time. Understanding the whole story, Ji Tianxing was somewhat touched in his heart and had an even better impression of Lin Shui. He gradually felt that Lin Shui only looked valiant on the surface and was even a little carefree. But in reality she was not a true bloodthirsty demoness. It was just that in the past her temper was even more irritable because of the blood feud. Now that the great grudge was avenged and the knot in her heart was also untied, her true nature could be seen. A little straightforward and shrewish but kind-hearted. Shui Lin saw that Ji Tianxing was silent and deep in thought. She couldn't help but tease. What's wrong? Are you touched by this old lady's deep friendship? Don't misunderstand, this old lady has no interest in a pretty boy like you. This old lady is only doing this to repay the favor. After all, you helped this old lady take revenge. After saying that, she reached out to pat Zhenhong on the shoulder and give her a few words of advice. Unfortunately, the height difference was a little too big. She withdrew her hand without leaving a trace and said to Zhenhong, "Little beauty, I'm your senior. I'm a good friend of young Master Tianxing. We're friends. So don't think that I'm here to steal your man." Zhenhong's expression was very awkward. His cheeks were red as he lowered his head, not knowing whether he should answer or not. Ji Tianxing was also quite embarrassed and had a headache. He thought to himself, this demoness really has no filter on her mouth and no taboos. How can she be so indecent? Sir God Blood Illusion, who was by the side, was at a loss due to the awkward atmosphere. Seeing that Shui Lin didn't notice and didn't intend to restrain himself, he quickly coughed twice and interrupted Lin Shui's words. Ji Tianxing took the opportunity to change the topic. He stared at Sir God Blood Illusion and asked with concern, "Deputy Sect Master, I have always wanted to ask you, how did you get injured back then? Why haven't you reforged your divine body? Is it because you've cultivated some kind of technique, or you haven't found a suitable opportunity?" Sir God Blood Illusion also wanted to resolve the awkwardness. He quickly answered, "Young Master Tianxing, the Blood Blade sect no longer exists. Please don't call me Deputy Sect Master. Just call me Blood Illusion. As for my divine body, it's a long story." He told Ji Tianxing everything that had happened from beginning to end. It was actually very simple. Back then he got to know Shui Lin, who had just arrived at the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom. He already had a grudge with the Blood Sword sect, and Shui Lin hated the Blood Sword sect to the bone. The two of them were like-minded and decided to join forces to deal with the Blood Sword sect. In a battle, the two of them were besieged by the experts of the Blood Sword sect. In order to save Shui Lin, Blood Illusion blocked a fatal blow from Lin Shan. From then on, his body was destroyed. Moreover, Lin Shan used the blood sword to destroy his divine body and poisoned and cursed his godhead. This caused him to be unable to reforge his divine body. For nearly 1,000 years he could only cultivate a special ability to maintain his illusory state. Ji Tianxing understood the situation and pondered for a moment with a frown. Suddenly he had an idea. "Blood Illusion, do you want to reforge your divine body and return to normal?" Sir God Blood Illusion was stunned for a moment before he laughed bitterly. Young master, you must be joking. For the past few hundred years, I've been dreaming of reforging my divine body. However, it's as difficult as ascending to the heavens. I've tried countless methods, but they all ended in failure. After a long time, I've become disheartened and no longer have any hope. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a smile, actually, this isn't rare. It's just that most people don't use the right method, so they can't recover. Sir God Blood Illusion was stunned for a moment before he asked in an excited tone, young master, you mean, you have a way? Ji Tianxing nodded. Of course. His tone was firm and confident. Sir God Blood Illusion became even more excited. His spirit that had been dormant for many years was suddenly roused. Even though he was just a ball of blood light without a body, his expression couldn't be seen. The ball of blood light surged faster and the light became even more dazzling. He wasn't the only one. Lin Shui revealed a shocked expression as she looked at Ji Tianxing in disbelief. Hey, this is a serious matter. You can't joke about it. Ji Tianxing turned his head and stared at her. He said angrily, do I look like someone who jokes? Lin Shui thought seriously for a moment before she nodded. Ji Tianxing rolled his eyes and ignored her. Sir God Blood Illusion's voice was trembling as he said with anticipation, young master, please enlighten me. How can I recover my divine body? Ji Tianxing said in a serious tone, I know a secret magic called substitution of the plum tree for the peach tree. For a god like you who can't reforge your divine body, you can use a divine item as a medium to reforge your divine body. Of course, the higher the grade of the divine item, the more powerful the divine body that can be reforged. Divine item? Sir God Blood Illusion was silent for a moment before he asked doubtfully, what kind of divine item is needed? A divine weapon? Or a rare treasure? Or some medicinal herb? Ji Tianxing nodded and said, the things that you mentioned can basically be used. However, the grade of the divine item can't be too high or too low. It has to be the most suitable for you. If the grade is too high, you won't be able to perform substitution and you won't be able to control your divine body. If the grade of the divine item is too low, it will be easy to reforge your divine body. However, your future achievements will be limited and your abilities will be greatly reduced. Sir God Blood Illusion nodded and said solemnly, thank you for your guidance, young master. I roughly understand. I need to consider carefully before I ask for your advice. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, I still remember how to cultivate and cast the ability of substituting the plum tree for the peach tree. When you need it, I will teach you. As for the divine item that can reforge your divine body, I have already thought of it. After I recover from my injuries, I can get it for you. Sir God Blood Illusion was even more surprised and asked with anticipation, may I ask what divine item you are talking about? Ji Tianxing said with a playful smile, how about a branch of the Shui Yan sacred tree? Chapter 3088. What? The branch of the bloody flame sacred tree? Sir God Blood Illusion and Lin Shui were stunned by Ji Tianxing's words. Both of them were surprised and in disbelief. Lin Shui wasn't involved and didn't say much. She only looked at Ji Tianxing with a complicated gaze and felt emotional. Sir God Blood Illusion was uneasy and said with a bitter smile, Mister, this is too precious, right? He had stayed in the Bloody Flame Divine Kingdom for 1,000 years and knew that the Bloody Flame Sacred Tree was a divine item that guarded the kingdom. It was very precious and powerful. Although everyone knew that Ji Tianxing had snatched the Bloody Flame Sacred Tree, that was a top divine item that he had exchanged for with his life. Sir God Blood Illusion and him were neither relatives nor friends. They didn't have any connection or friendship. However, Ji Tianxing was willing to use the branch of the sacred tree to help him reconstruct his divine body. He was too generous. Sir God Blood Illusion was overwhelmed by the favor. Ji Tianxing saw through his thoughts and hurriedly waved his hand and persuaded, Shui Illusion, don't be so surprised. I have already snatched the entire Bloody Flame sacred tree. It's nothing to take a branch. However, this is a great opportunity for you. The Bloody Flame sacred tree is a quasi-king level divine item. A branch with excellent quality is also a supreme grade divine item. In your current situation, you definitely can't use quasi-king level and king level divine items. Using an ordinary monarch level divine object would greatly reduce one's strength. The branch of the Bloody Flame sacred tree is the most suitable. There is a high chance of success and it's easier to reconstruct a new body. The only pity is that if you use the branch of the sacred tree to reconstruct your body, your future achievements will be limited. You are destined to never break through to Divine King Realm and can only reach peak Divine Lord Realm at most. Seeing Ji Tianqing's reaction, Lin Shui couldn't help but mutter, "Look at what you said, why does it sound so awkward?" Even if Shui illusion doesn't reconstruct his body, he can't break through to Divine King Realm in his life. Reaching peak Divine Lord Realm is already the limit. Not to mention him, aren't all of us here the same? Divine King Realm Supreme Experts, how high and mighty were they? That's a peerless expert that's hard to come by in 1,000 years. Can anyone reach that level so casually? Sir God Blood Illusion quickly nodded in agreement and thanked Ji Tianqing. Yes, Sect Master is right. Based on my aptitude and current state, being able to break through to 8th stage realm is already a great fortune. If I'm able to reach 9th stage realm peak, then I would have no regrets in this lifetime. As for the Divine King Realm, I don't even dare to dream about it. It's too illusory. Ji Tianqing was at a loss for words. He didn't know what to say. Only Zhenhong shook his head and said seriously, "Senior Lin Shui is wrong. The few of us really don't have any hope, nor do we dare to dream of becoming deity kings. But young master is different from us. He has the greatest hope of becoming a divine king." When Zhenhong said this, his clear eyes were filled with certainty and expectation. Shuelin glanced at her and thought to herself, alas. This young lass has indeed been bewitched by him. Love really makes one lose their rationality. Alright, stop this question. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and interrupted this topic. He looked at Sir God Blood Illusion and said seriously, "Since you feel that there's no problem, then it's settled. After I go into closed-door cultivation to recuperate, I will retrieve a branch from the sacred tree and help you reconstruct your divine body." Sir God Blood Illusion was filled with gratitude as he congealed a figure from his bloodlight and bowed towards him, expressing his gratitude in a solemn tone. "Thank you, young master, for saving me. Shui Huan will remember this kindness in my heart and will never forget it. From today onwards, as long as young master has any instructions, Shui Huan is willing to go through water and tread on fire without any hesitation." Ji Tianqing smiled as he waved his hand and said, "It's just a small matter. You don't have to be so courteous. It's too serious." This matter was settled just like that. Everyone chatted for a while more before they entered their respective secret rooms to meditate and recuperate. Ji Tianqing stayed in the secret room as he drew out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and placed it on the table. He entered the divine pagoda, returned to the distorted spacetime and started to recuperate. His injuries were too severe. His internal organs, meridians and divine bones were all damaged. Helpless, he had no choice but to consume large amounts of divine pills and consume large amounts of divine stones and origin stones. He even had to absorb the heaven mending pearl's power. Fortunately, his self-healing ability was very strong. In addition to these pills and resources, his recovery speed was even faster. At the same time, Yun Yao and Jiku had long broken through to the Divine Lord Realm and were cultivating in the distorted spacetime to consolidate their divine Dao foundations. After breaking through to the Divine Lord Realm, they entered a whole new realm. Their talent and comprehension abilities were stimulated, and they stepped into a higher level. Those divine abilities and supreme skills that could not be cultivated in the past could now be comprehended and cultivated. The two felt that their strength was not strong enough, so they cultivated even more diligently. White Dragon, Qianyu, Black Dragon, and Ji Wushuang were also fully focused on cultivating. Their goal was to break through to the Divine Lord Realm as soon as possible. What happened previously allowed them to have a clear understanding of the Divine Realm. If one did not reach the Divine Lord Realm, they practically did not have the qualifications to travel around the Divine Realm. In the next 3 days, Ji Tianqing did not appear. He had been healing in the distorted spacetime. 3 days had passed in the outside world and 5 months had passed in the distorted spacetime. After 5 months of treatment, his injuries were almost half healed. Although the injuries to his organs and godhead were still there, the injuries to his meridians and divine body were mostly healed, and there were no major problems. He no longer looked haggard and weak, and he had returned to normal. However, his strength was still a bit weak, only about 70% of his peak state. Of course, as long as he did not meet someone as strong as Prince Lian, he could protect himself. Late that night, the divine ship arrived at Tilted Wind City. When it was a few thousand miles away from Tilted Wind City, the divine ship stopped in a mountain range. Everyone stayed in the divine ship and Lin Shui flew out alone. She waved her hand and shot out a bloody light, shrinking the divine ship by tens of thousands of times, and put it into her body. Then she passed through the night and sneaked into Tilted Wind City alone. She did not go through the city gate. Instead, she found a remote city wall and cast a spell to sneak into the city. There were guards patrolling both inside and outside the city wall, and there was even a monarch high-grade defensive array. But to her, these were not much of a problem. Soon she sneaked into Tilted Wind City. Following Ji Tianxing's instructions, she sneaked into the residential area in the south of the city, and arrived at the door of an ancient house. There was someone guarding the door and it was a white-haired old man with a crooked back. Lin Shui gave a secret signal. The white-haired old man's eyes flashed and he opened the door silently, inviting Lin Shui to enter. After Lin Shui entered the house, she took out the divine ship. Ji Tianxing, Zhen Hong, and the others appeared in the house one after another. At this moment, the lights in the pitch-black courtyard gradually lit up. A young man in a golden dragon robe appeared from the dark hall, and he walked toward Ji Tianxing. "Young master, you came as promised. Seeing that you are safe and sound, I am finally relieved." Hearing this voice, Lin Shui was stunned. Seeing the face of the man in the golden robe, her eyes widened and she was in disbelief. Why is it him? Chapter 3089. Lin Shui could not believe her eyes. Not only her but Zhen Hong, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the others were also stunned. Then the golden-robed man walked up to the crowd and greeted Ji Tianxing with a bow. "Third Prince, how have you been?" "Young Master Tianxing, everything is fine." That's right. The person who was hiding in the house and waiting to receive Ji Tianxing was the third prince. After a long time, everyone came to their senses. Lin Shui looked at the third prince with a strange expression. She was full of questions and thought to herself, Tianxing just killed his father. Why isn't he sad at all? Not only did he not seek revenge on Tianxing, but he is also here to receive Tianxing? Could it be that he ordered Tianxing to kill the monarch? Isn't this too crazy? Lin Shui was shocked by this bold conjecture that popped up in her mind. Not only did Lin Shui have a strange expression, but Zhen Hong, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the others also looked at the third prince with a strange expression. At this time, the third prince and Ji Tianxing finished exchanging greetings and led everyone into the main hall. They did not discuss matters in the main hall. Instead, they entered a secret underground chamber through a secret door in the corner of the main hall. The secret chamber was not big, only about 30 feet in radius. But it was big enough to accommodate everyone. They sat around a table and discussed matters while drinking tea. The third prince sat at the head of the table and looked around at everyone. He showed a self-mocking smile and said, "I guess no one expected that I would be here to receive you, right?" Everyone was silent. Only Lin Shui nodded. The third prince didn't feel awkward and explained, "Actually, this is beyond reason, but it's also within expectations." Before the divine blood ceremony began, young Master Tianxing had already made up his mind. He wants to get rid of the fifth prince and help me ascend the throne. The divine kingdom has been stable for thousands of years. Everything is in order. There is no need for a schemer like the fifth prince. Moreover, the fifth prince is just a puppet of Prince Lian. The blood flame divine kingdom will also become a tool for Prince Lian's revenge. These twists and turns could not be discussed openly before. Now everyone should understand. As for me, I am indeed not shrewd or ambitious. In fact, I am somewhat indecisive. However, with the current situation of the God Nation, it was indeed unable to withstand the storm of war. What it needed was a gentle ruler. In comparison, this prince is the best choice. Shui Lin was quite surprised and couldn't help but exclaim, "I originally thought that he only wanted the blood flame sacred tree. I didn't expect that he would dare to interfere with the succession of the monarch." The third prince nodded slightly. That's right. It was because of this that the monarch was determined to kill Tianxing. However, when the two of them were fighting, Tianxing realized that the king had no intention of abdicating. He just had other plans. But now that things have developed to that point, there's nothing we can do about it. We can only make the best of it. Lin Shui was stunned. "So Tianxing killed the monarch?" she asked. Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to speak, the third prince took the initiative to explain, "It wasn't Tianxing who wanted to kill the monarch. It was the monarch who refused to come to his senses and swore to kill Tianxing. Before that incident happened, Tianqing promised me that he would spare the monarch's life and would not harm the innocent people of royal city. In fact, Tianqing fulfilled his promise. He gave the monarch a chance and did not harm the people of royal city. When they heard this, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong and the others already understood everything. There was no need for the third prince to explain the rest. Everyone was well aware. The monarch and the fifth prince were both killed by Ji Tianqing. As the saying went, a country could not be without a monarch for a day. The only princes who were qualified to succeed the monarch were the second prince and the third prince. Therefore, the two princes would think of ways to fight for the position of monarch. The most important thing was to succeed the monarch and stabilize the situation of the God nation. Everyone knew without asking that the third prince must have been busy with this matter in the past 3 days. There must have been a huge change in royal city. Everyone fell into silence as they secretly speculated and pondered. Ji Tianqing looked at the third prince and asked, "There has been a lot of turmoil in royal city in the past few days, right? Has it calmed down now?" The third prince nodded and said, "Since you split royal city with your sword, the entire city has been in chaos. When this king rushed back to Monarch City, the city was already in a mess. All the forces took action as soon as they heard the news. The people were panicking and fleeing in all directions. Fortunately, the second prince and I took action in time and suppressed the chaos. Even so, we put in all our effort and spent 2 whole days to calm Monarch City down. Now there are many small disturbances but no major ones. The obituary of the monarch's death has been sent to all the counties in the God nation. The whole nation will mourn for 3 days." At this point, the third prince looked apologetic and said to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, the entire royal city witnessed the scene of you seizing the bloody flame sacred tree and fighting the monarch. So you can't wash away the crime of regicide. You can only bear it. You have done so much for me, but I have to announce to the world that I will treat you as an irreconcilable enemy. In the future, I'm afraid we will never be able to meet face to face." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a smile, "There are gains and losses. Compared to helping you fulfill your wish, this is nothing. Besides, I didn't plan to stay in the bloody flame divine kingdom. I will be leaving soon." The third prince nodded slightly as a look of regret flashed in his eyes. He wanted to ask Ji Tianqing to stay, but he knew that it was impossible. The bloody flame divine kingdom was too small to accommodate Ji Tianqing, a divine dragon. Lin Shui saw the two of them sympathizing with each other and felt that it was ridiculous. She couldn't accept it and muttered with a strange expression, "The whole kingdom is in mourning now. Billions of people think that Tianqing is a traitor who killed the monarch. Everyone has the right to punish him. If the people knew that the third prince who threatened to tear Tianqing into pieces was secretly meeting him here, I wonder how they would react?" Hearing this, the third prince frowned and looked at her. He said with a calm expression, "In this world, there are too many strange and ridiculous things that happen at any time and place. Others think it is ridiculous because they don't know the inside story and the twists and turns. The real reason is only known to the people involved. The monarch is my father. Logically speaking, he was killed by Tianqing. I should hate Tianqing and avenge my father. But how do you know that there is no such thing as family affection in the royal family? How cruel is the inside story of the royal family's war? Fortunately, Tianqing won this time. He killed the monarch and not the other way around. If he lost, the fifth prince would be crowned as the crown prince. The monarch would still be the monarch and the kingdom would still be prosperous and peaceful. But how can Ben Wang and second imperial brother survive?" When the crowd heard this, they were all silent. Ji Tianqing saw the awkward atmosphere and changed the topic. He asked the third prince, "Since the situation in the kingdom is stabilizing, what is Prince Lian doing? How is the result of your fight with the second prince? You should have a 90% chance of becoming the monarch, right?" Mobile version update website. Chapter 3090. What the third prince said earlier was the cause and process as well as the inside story. However, what Ji Tianqing was asking about was the current situation and situation. This was what everyone was most concerned about, so they listened attentively. The third prince said, "Prince Lian was severely injured by you and hasn't shown himself since. Even his subordinates are hiding in the royal city and haven't taken the opportunity to cause trouble. My guess is that his injuries are too severe and he's in a hurry to recuperate, so he doesn't have the chance to cause trouble. Moreover, the Great Yan Empire has also received an obituary of the monarch's death. The emperor even sent a letter to express his condolences. This means that the great Yan Emperor is paying attention to this as well. Prince Lian doesn't dare to cause trouble. After a pause, the third prince looked as though he was relieved of a burden. He said, "Second brother has just returned to the royal city for 2 days. He was able to endure his injuries and stabilize the situation with me. After the situation in the royal city was stabilized, it should have been time for us to compete. However, his injuries suddenly worsened and his life was almost in danger. Since then he stayed in his residence to recuperate and hasn't shown himself since. Even his subordinates didn't stop me from seizing power. Everything went smoothly. If nothing unexpected happens, I'll be able to take control of the royal city and the royal court in half a month at most. After the monarch's funeral, I'll be able to ascend the throne." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, I'm relieved." The third prince sighed with emotion. Before this prince had fantasized countless times about being able to take over the throne and become the next monarch. However, every time I made a deduction, it was extremely dangerous. I had to go through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. I didn't expect things to go so smoothly. The throne came so easily. In fact, I feel like I'm dreaming now." After he finished speaking, he looked at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze and said sincerely, "Tianxing, I have to thank you for all of this. If it weren't for your help, I wouldn't be where I am today. In fact, without your help, second brother wouldn't have given in." Although he did not say it, he knew very well in his heart. The second prince's injuries suddenly worsened because of Ji Tianxing. During the battle, Ji Tianxing had secretly released a deadly poison. The monarch and many experts were poisoned, and the two of them were no exception. Ji Tianxing detonated the poison in the others and killed the monarch and many experts. Ji Tianxing was also the reason why the poison in his body hadn't acted up until now. If Ji Tianxing wanted to kill him, it would only take a single thought. The second prince's life was in danger because of the poison. Of course, he understood that this was Ji Tianxing's will. Ji Tianxing had made it clear that he supported the third prince to become the king. If the second prince did not want to die from the poison, he could only choose to back down. Was his life more important or was his position more important? The second prince had already made his choice. It was just that everyone had a tacit understanding. Everything that needed to be discussed had been discussed. After that, Ji Tianxing began to instruct the third prince. First, he used a secret technique to help the third prince get rid of the poison in his body, completely eliminating the hidden danger. Then he took out a translucent blood-red branch and gave it to the third prince. "The blood flame secret realm has already been destroyed. I can't return the sacred tree to you. Only this blood sea stupa is the king's personal treasure. I'm returning it to you now." The third prince hurriedly took the blood sea stupa and examined it in his hands. "So this is the legendary blood sea stupa?" The founding monarch used the first branch of the sacred tree to refine a top-tier divine item? Although he was a prince, he had only heard of the blood sea stupa's existence. He had never seen it with his own eyes. Now that he had obtained this divine item, he couldn't help but observe it for a long time. After he put away the blood sea stupa, Ji Tianxing reminded him again, "After this incident, the blood flame divine kingdom will be weak for many years. You will need to work hard and love the people to recover. Fortunately, the divine kingdom has accumulated enough resources for 10,000 years. Even if it loses the sacred tree, it won't affect it too much. Also, you have to think carefully about how to deal with the second prince. After this failure, he might not be able to recover from this setback and be disheartened in the future. But with his temperament, it's more likely that he won't be convinced and will harbor resentment toward you and me. You have to suppress his faction and keep an eye on it. You mustn't let it develop as it pleases. Otherwise, you'll only be asking for trouble and harming him." The third prince hastily nodded and said, "Thank you for your advice, young master. I'll remember it." The enmity between Great Yan's emperor and Prince Lian is the best example. I won't repeat the same mistake. The two of them chatted for a while longer before they rose to their feet and bade each other farewell. The third prince cupped his fists and said, "Young master, it's absolutely safe here. You can rest assured and recuperate here until you've recovered. I have too many things to do after this. I'm afraid I won't have the time to see you again. If there's any trouble or inconvenience, just send me a message. I'll do my best to help." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "I'll have to trouble you then. I don't know when we'll meet again after today. I hope you'll stay true to your heart and see things through." The third prince bowed deeply and said nothing more. He bade farewell and left. However, when he reached the door of the hidden chamber, he suddenly remembered something and stopped in his tracks. He turned to look back and smiled inexplicably. He said to Ji Tianxing, "Oh, right, I almost forgot about something. Someone insisted on coming with me. She's waiting for you in the parlor in the backyard. Naturally, you can choose not to meet her. After tonight, she'll leave." After saying this, the third prince left without looking back. He left with an inexplicable smile and a complicated look in his eyes. The hidden chamber fell silent. Everyone's eyes were trained on Ji Tianxing. "Fuff. Why are all of you looking at me?" Ji Tianxing pretended to cough and said sternly, "It's safe here. All of you can rest here for a while." Lin Shui looked at him with a playful smile and waved her hand to interrupt him. "Don't be in a hurry to change the topic, lad. Which woman did you provoke this time? She actually chased you all the way here?" Zhen Hong guessed the answer and almost blurted it out. However, he forced himself to hold it back. Left emissary Jean saw that the atmosphere was a little awkward, so he quickly tried to smooth things over. "Sect leader, you can't say that about young Master Tianxing. With young Master Tianxing's appearance, talent, and temperament, he'll be a dragon among men wherever he goes. Of course, he'll be loved by thousands of women. Even if many women are infatuated with him, that's human nature. Besides, maybe that woman is just his friend." Ji Tianxing looked deeply at left emissary Jean and nodded. Well, Xiao Jin is still the one who understands and thinks thoroughly. What he said makes sense. Anyway, all of you can choose a hidden chamber to rest in. After saying this, he ignored Lin Shui's hateful look and got up to leave the hidden chamber. Not long after, he walked through the courtyard and came to the parlor in the dark night. He saw a slim figure standing alone in the night, looking at the garden outside the window in a daze. Mobile version update website. Chapter 3091. That graceful figure in silver armor was none other than Ning Xiyuan. Back then, after the arena tournament ended, after Ji Tianxing and Zhen Hong entered the Blood Flame secret realm, she returned to the Longwind courtyard and waited patiently for news. However, 2 days later, Ji Tianxing did not return. Instead, she saw the palace activating its defensive array. Ji Tianxing and the monarch were facing off against each other and were besieged by countless imperial guards and palace experts. Later, Ji Tianxing broke through the palace's array and slashed Monarch City with his sword. He then escaped from the city and disappeared without a trace. Ever since then, Ning Xiyuan had been living in worry and anxiety. She had also escaped from the chaotic Monarch City and chased after him for tens of thousands of miles. However, she was too weak and was left behind without a trace. She could not find any trace of Ji Tianxing and the others. Helpless, she could only return to Monarch City and wait for news. Fortunately, the third prince returned to Monarch City half a day later. She dragged her aunt to find the third prince and pestered him tirelessly, asking about what happened in Ji Tianxing's whereabouts. In the end, the third prince could not resist her persistence. He could only promise to bring her to Slanting Wind City to see Ji Tianxing again. At this time, she had been waiting in the flower pavilion for half the night. She had been excited before, but she had already calmed down. She was in a daze. The scenes in Qingshan City and Tianxia County City flashed through her mind. It had only been a few months, but things had changed. The changes were too great. Compared to the surging waves and changing winds now, she missed the calm and tranquility of the past more. Just as she was immersed in her thoughts, she sighed with emotion. Ji Tianxing walked into the flower pavilion. Looking at her back, he said, "I'm sorry to have kept Miss Ning waiting." Ning Xiyuan immediately woke up. She suppressed her complicated thoughts and turned to look at Ji Tianxing. Seeing Ji Tianxing, who was 3 steps away from her, looking as handsome as ever with a mysterious and reserved temperament, her hanging heart finally settled down. At the very least, Ji Tianxing was still safe and sound after experiencing such a shocking storm. That was the greatest blessing. Ning Xiyuan bowed slightly and said, "Greetings to Gongzi Tianxing. It's great that you're safe and sound. Sorry for making you worry." Ji Tianxing smiled. Regardless of the distance between the two of them or their demeanor and tone, they remained polite and courteous. However, there was an invisible distance between them. After a moment of silence, Ning Xiyuan asked, "Dare I ask, young master, what do you plan to do next?" Ji Tianxing didn't hide anything and answered honestly, "I'll recuperate here first. After I've recovered, I'll leave Blood Flame Divine Country and head south." Ning Xiyuan frowned slightly and said worriedly, Doesn't that mean we have to pass through the Great Yan Empire? Ji Tianqing nodded and said, that's where I want to go. I have some things to investigate. Ning Xiuan vaguely guessed something and asked, is it the matter you asked us to help you investigate? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. Ning Xiuan became even more worried and said, but you have a deep feud with Prince Lian. I'm afraid it'll be very dangerous for you to go to the Great Yan Empire. It's okay. Ji Tianqing shook his head. Ning Xiuan stopped persuading him and said, the Great Yan Empire is full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. It's not like Blood Flame Divine Country, which is remote. When you're in the Great Yan Empire, you have to be careful. Don't be reckless. No matter how far you go, there will be people who will worry about you. Ji Tianqing smiled and thanked him. Then he asked, when do you plan to clear things up with Qi Huangji? Ning Xiuan was taken aback. He said hesitantly, let's wait a few more days. When the turmoil in the divine country is over and the third prince is free, it'll be better to ask him to deal with it. By then the third prince would be the king. With the king's golden words, helping Ning Xiuan and Qi Huangji to cancel the engagement would not hurt the Qi family's reputation too much. Moreover, given the third prince's character and style, he would definitely compensate the Qi family heavily. In this way the Qi family would be comforted and accounted for. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, since you've thought about it so thoroughly, I have nothing to worry about. I thank you on behalf of the Qi family. You don't have to be so polite, young master. Ning Xiuan quickly shook her head. After hesitating for a while, she asked in a complicated tone, if I may be so bold as to ask, young master, is it possible for you to come back in the future? Ji Tianqing thought for a while and shook his head. Who can predict what will happen in the future? Maybe I will come back, but that will be thousands or tens of thousands of years later. The light in Ning Xiuan's eyes dimmed, and he felt an inexplicable pain in his heart. However, she suppressed her emotions and tried hard to remain calm. Her eyes did not turn misty. She forced a smile and said, that's right. The Blood Flame Divine Kingdom is a small place after all. Young master will definitely spread his wings and fly high in the future, roaming the world. Xiuan wishes young master a smooth journey in advance. I hope young master will be able to soar into the 9 heavens and meet with the wind and clouds. Ji Tianqing looked at her and asked, thank you, Miss Ning. Then shall we bid farewell? Ning Xiuan was silent for a while before she bowed deeply and said in a choked voice, I will never forget young master's kindness for the rest of my life. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. I hope we will meet again. After saying that, she suppressed the tears in her eyes and walked away with her head lowered. When she brushed past Ji Tianqing, she could no longer suppress the sadness in her heart. 2 drops of crystal-clear tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Ji Tianqing stood in place and watched her leave in a hurry. After a long time, when her figure disappeared into the night, Ji Tianqing sighed silently. If I hadn't fallen in love back then, I wouldn't be so sad now. Regarding this, he was helpless. There was nothing he could do but sigh. As soon as his voice fell, a faint voice sounded in his ear. You're such a hypocrite. If you didn't want to see her sad, why did you provoke her? Besides, she's a girl and can't open her mouth. Why didn't you take the initiative to take her away? Following the voice, a reddish-purple figure landed beside Ji Tianqing, bringing along a fragrant wind. Ji Tianqing didn't need to look back to know it was Lin Shui. He gently shook his head and said, your words are biased. I never took the initiative to approach her, let alone pursue her. How could I provoke her? Lin Shui curled her lips and said, even if you didn't pursue her, you're too outstanding and dazzling. You appeared in front of her and even helped her. That's provoking. Ji Tianqing was helpless. Okay, you win. Lin Shui showed a mocking smile and asked, you knew she was interested in you, so why didn't you take the initiative to invite her and take her away from the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom? Are you afraid that this old lady and that Zhenhong girl will be jealous? Don't worry, this old lady isn't such a petty person. It's normal for a playboy like you to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. Before she could finish, Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and glared at her. Why are you and that Zhenhong girl jealous? We're just friends. Friends, understand? Don't always talk nonsense and make people think we have some kind of ambiguous relationship. Not only was Lin Shui not angry, but she also took the opportunity to stick to him and whispered with a charming look. This old lady can't figure it out. Are you willing? Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Chapter 3092. Ji Tianxing hurriedly took 2 steps back to avoid Lin Shui. He stared at her with a serious face and said in a serious tone, "You'd better put away this dangerous idea or my wives won't let you off." Lin Shui was still smiling and said in a mocking tone, "I already guessed that you have wives, but I didn't expect you to confess so quickly. However, just because your wives aren't happy doesn't mean that you'll refuse." As she spoke, she leaned forward again and stretched out her arm to Ji Tianxing's neck. Ji Tianxing retreated again and said helplessly with a frown, "Okay, then I'll make it clear. I treat you as a friend, so don't have any ideas about me or it'll be difficult for us to be friends. Moreover, don't you feel guilty about being an old cow eating young grass?" "Humph." Lin Shui pretended to be angry and snorted coldly. She said angrily, "In the end you just think that I'm old? I'm only a little over 1,000 years old. Compared to a lifespan of more than 100,000 years, I'm still young, understand? You always look at gods with the eyes of mortals, why can't you let it go?" Ji Tianxing couldn't do anything about her and could only change the topic. "I think that God Monarch Blood Fantasy is very infatuated with you, why don't you consider him?" He. Lin Shui rolled her eyes and said disdainfully, "Even if I give him a chance, would he dare? Don't try to change the topic, he and I can only be considered friends. I have no interest in him at all. I just want to eat young grass like you, don't even think about escaping." Ji Tianxing was completely at his wits' end. He felt that if he continued to be entangled with Lin Shui, he would definitely vomit blood. Fortunately, Zhen Hong arrived at the flower hall in time. She pretended not to hear Lin Shui's words and greeted the two of them. She said respectfully, "Young master, everyone has gone to rest. Your injuries haven't healed, you should go into seclusion to heal as soon as possible. Zhen Hong has already prepared a secret room, please go there now." "Okay." Ji Tianxing nodded, very satisfied with Zhen Hong's timely rescue, and took her out of the flower hall. Shui Lin watched them leave with a playful smile on her face. However, after Ji Tianxing and Zhen Hong left, she put away her frivolous attitude and returned to normal. Maybe I've really wronged him? After interacting with him for a few days, he really didn't see him overstep his boundaries. But why are those little girls so infatuated with him? After muttering to herself, Shui Lin collected her thoughts and said to herself, "Time reveals a person's true nature. It's only been a few days, but it's just a glimpse of the big picture. After I observe him for a few more years, I will definitely be able to see through the truth." After that, Shui Lin raised her chin proudly, turned around and disappeared into the darkness. In the following month, for the Blood Flame Divine Country, it was a month of intense turmoil and turning points. The king passed away and the royal family held a solemn funeral. The entire divine nation was filled with grief and mourned for several days. Following which, numerous important officials and officials of the imperial court requested the royal family to appoint a new monarch as soon as possible. After all, a country couldn't go a day without a ruler. After weighing the pros and cons, the royal family agreed to this request and let everyone discuss who was more suitable. Most of the important officials and officials of the imperial court expressed their support for the third prince. Although a small number of them openly supported the second prince, the majority agreed. In the end, the royal family announced that the third prince would succeed the throne. Just like that, the third prince didn't even need to be crowned as the crown prince and became the new monarch. The new monarch had to choose an auspicious day and hold a complicated and solemn ceremony. After the new monarch succeeded the throne, the entire country celebrated for 7 days. Even the emperor of the Great Yan Empire had sent a congratulatory letter and a generous gift. After the succession of the new monarch issued many more edicts. Most of them were about the dismissal and appointment of the various counties and cities. Many people who didn't do anything were replaced and many capable people were promoted. This had a big impact on the various counties and cities. However, the divine nation's overall situation was stable. Even if there were some disturbances and turbulence, they would be resolved quickly. These were all things that were on the surface. Secretly, the second prince had lost to the third prince and was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. After all, the person who had defeated him was not the third prince but Ji Tianxing. He still believed that if not for Ji Tianxing's help, the third prince would not be his match. Even though he was poisoned and had to give up the throne because of the threat to his life, he was still unwilling. But in his heart he was still unwilling to accept it. he was also unwilling to accept the third prince. After he recovered from his injuries, he secretly gathered his forces to resist the third prince's suppression and purges. In addition, he also planned to leave the imperial court and hide at the border of the divine nation. As long as he controlled a few counties at the border, he would be able to protect himself and be qualified to negotiate with the third prince. In the future, when the third prince wanted to kill him, he could even declare himself king. But it was a pity. The second prince's plan had just started, but it was stopped by the third prince. After Ji Tianxing's reminder, the third prince had already made arrangements in secret. Late at night, the key people under the second prince's command were all captured in one fell swoop. The third prince brought a few of his trusted subordinates to meet the second prince. No one knew what the two brothers talked about in the secret room. After 2 hours, the third prince left. The next day, the third prince announced the edict in front of everyone in the imperial court. The third prince was given the title of Prince of Peace, for cities in the Blood Flame County as his fief, and a death exemption talisman, guaranteeing him a lifetime of wealth. However, he was stripped of his position as general of the imperial cavalry, stripped of all his power, and no longer appointed to an official position. When this edict was spread throughout the divine nation, everyone understood that the expected internal strife would not happen. The second prince had already lost. He was stripped of his right to resist by the third prince, and could only stay in the Blood Flame County for the rest of his life as a carefree prince. This was the best outcome for the people of the divine nation. At this point, the turmoil that lasted for a month finally ended. Everyone's attention was focused on the two princes and the imperial court. Everyone neglected one person. Prince Lian, who was ordered to guard the Blood Flame divine nation and act as the voice of the empire, never appeared. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air without any sense of existence. At the same time, Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, and the rest also recuperated and adjusted their breathing for a month in that courtyard in Slanting Wind City. Lin Shui, Zhen Hong left emissary Jin, and the rest all healed their injuries and their strength reached their peak state. God Monarch Blood Illusion's harvest was great, and he was incomparably surprised. After Ji Tianxing's injuries healed, he indeed fulfilled his promise. He cut off a branch from the sacred tree, and using the method of replacing the dead tree with the dead tree, he helped God Monarch Blood Illusion reconstruct his divine body. This way, God Monarch Blood Illusion directly reached level 8 Divine Lord Realm. He also possessed a supreme grade Monarch level body. His power and defense were both very powerful, and he even had some special effects. He was very satisfied with this and was also grateful to Ji Tianxing, swearing to follow him wholeheartedly in the future. As for Ji Tianxing, his harvest in this month exceeded everyone's imagination. Chapter 3093. Even though only a month had passed in the outside world. But Ji Tianxing had been in the Divine Pagoda's distorted spacetime all along and spent a full 4 years and 2 months. In the first 2 years he had been circulating his energy to heal his injuries. He consumed several tens of thousands of source stones, divine pills worth 200 million and resources. Coupled with his powerful recovery ability, he healed his injuries and recovered to his peak state. Following that, he took out a large number of divine spark fragments and started devouring and refining them. Among them, there were not just country monarchs. There were also more than a dozen high-ranked divine lords and many imperial experts' divine spark fragments. A total of more than 40 people's divine spark fragments. All of them had strength above 5th level Divine Lord realm. Each powerhouse's divine spark fragments contained hundreds of divine Dao laws. Ji Tianxing's gains were very astonishing. After he refined more than 40 divine spark fragments, he actually stripped away 36 types of divine Dao laws. They were basically all divine lord level laws, only a small number of celestial god level laws. Each type of divine Dao law made Ji Tianxing's strength increase greatly. The number of divine Dao laws he possessed had reached 251 types at this point. His strength was also very close to 6th level Divine Lord realm. Following that, he took out that blood flame sacred tree from the heaven mending pearl and transplanted it into the distorted spacetime. The massive blood flame sacred tree stood tall in the distorted spacetime, emitting endless red light and blood flame. Yunyao, Jiku, White Dragon, Wushuang, and the rest all received tremendous benefits because of this, the speed of their strength increasing greatly. After settling down the blood flame sacred tree, Ji Tianxing saw that there was still a large cluster of blood flame and divine power stored in the heaven mending pearl. That was the sacred tree power that he devoured with the heaven-mending pearl before he moved away the sacred tree. Hence he quickly devoured those sacred tree powers again, increasing his strength. This cultivation took more than a year's time again. After he refined all of the power of those divine trees, he himself would also naturally succeed when the conditions were right, breaking through to the 6th level Divine Lord realm. His present combat strength was several times stronger than before. Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation in satisfaction and left the distorted spacetime. He had been meditating in the secret chamber for a day when he heard Zhen Hong's voice outside the door. Reporting to young master, everyone has finished their closed-door cultivation. Let me invite you out, Ji Tianxing replied. Okay. Then he got up and left the secret room. Zhen Hong led him into the main hall where everyone was already waiting. The first to look at Ji Tianxing and greet him was of course Lin Shui. Then it was Sir God Blood Illusion. At this moment he was no longer a ball of bloody light like before. He turned into a tall and thin middle-aged man with dark skin that was tinged with red. He wore a long black robe and a square scarf hat. He had a long beard on his chin and was dressed like a middle-aged scholar. They looked like Ji Tianxing's entourage and butler. After nearly 10 days of recuperation, he had completely adapted to his new body and regained his former confidence. His entire temperament was no longer gloomy and indifferent. Instead, it was more steady and capable. As for Zhen Hong, left emissary Jean and Blood Dragon right emissary, they did not change much. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing with sparkling eyes, sizing him up with amazement. I haven't seen you for a month. Not only have you recovered from your injuries, but you have also become more handsome? Lin Shui sized up Ji Tianxing and muttered with doubt. Could it be that the magical power you have cultivated is to become more and more handsome and specifically attract women? Ji Tianxing could not help but glare at her. Everyone also covered their faces and chuckled. Zhen Hong said in all seriousness, although young master doesn't seem to have changed, your aura is more powerful. Maybe your magical power has improved again and you have broken through to the next realm? Hearing her say so, the others hurriedly nodded in agreement. Lin Shui frowned again and asked with doubt, weren't you a high-level Sir God a long time ago? Why are you still breaking through to the next realm in these few months? You don't look like you have broken through to the Divine King realm. We can only cultivate to the 9th level Divine Lord realm at most. Could it be that you can cultivate to the 15th level? Ji Tianxing was speechless again and could not resist rolling his eyes. Where do you get so many fantastic ideas? And all these ridiculous words? After this period of contact, everyone did not feel awkward seeing the two of them bickering. Everyone snickered to no end. Lin Shui glared at him with a displeased look and asked crossly, then you explain to us what in the world is going on with you? Ji Tianxing said very frankly, truth be told, back then when I helped you all eradicate the Blood Sword sect, I was still a low-level Sir God. Even until today, I'm only a peak middle-level Sir God and still far from high-level Sir God. Hearing these words, everyone was instantly dumbfounded. Everyone was dumbstruck as if they were petrified statues. They stared straight at Ji Tianxing, unable to say a word. This news was even more terrifying than the sudden collapse of the Great Yan Empire. After a long time, everyone gradually regained their senses. Lin Shui curled her lips crossly and said, forget it if you don't want to tell your secret. Why make up such a lie to deceive us? Sir God Blood Illusion, left emissary Jean, and Blood Dragon right emissary also had the same thoughts and kept silent. Ji Tianxing spread his hands helplessly and said with a light smile, see, you all don't believe me even if I tell you the truth. Don't get to the bottom of it in the future. Only Zhen Hong nodded his head with a serious look and said, I believe that young master is telling the truth and this is the only reasonable explanation. Reasonable my ass. Lin Shui could not help but retorted, he's still a low-level Sir God and can destroy the Blood Sword sect and kill the 7th stage realm Lin Shan? This is called reasonable? Zhen Hong choked and said weakly, young master's talent is extraordinary and his aptitude is outstanding. This is also understandable. Lin Shui was very helpless and reprimanded in disappointment. Lass, what kind of bewitching soup did he feed you? Why are you so bewitched? Zhen Hong frowned and instinctively wanted to refute but didn't know where to start. Ji Tianxing stared at Lin Shui in displeasure and said, you demoness, why do you want to bully everyone? Aren't we going to talk about serious matters? Lin Shui then dropped the subject. Ji Tianxing looked at the crowd and said solemnly, "The previous storm should have been resolved after a month of settling down. It's time for us to leave Blood Flame Divine Kingdom and continue heading south. I want to remind everyone that we are a team. No matter what danger or opportunity we encounter, we must be united. Otherwise, it will be hard for us to walk too far and we will be split up." Originally, he wanted to tell everyone. He had brought along his wife and disciples, and he was shouldering the lives of hundreds of millions of people. With such a heavy responsibility on him, he would definitely be cautious and not act rashly. But he thought for a moment and didn't say these words. These secrets were not suitable for too many people to know. Only after passing through various tests would everyone become his true friends. For example, Zhen Hong was the first person to pass the test. Lin Shui was currently considered half. Chapter 3094. Early in the morning the sun rose. Ji Tianxing and the rest boarded Lin Shui's ship and left Slanting Wind City. The situation was as Ji Tianxing had expected. Under the third prince's deliberate downplaying and shifting of the target, Slanting Wind City was very peaceful. Those city guards guarded the city as usual and did not enforce martial law at all. Following that, Ji Tianxing and the rest headed south and passed by many counties and cities. All the cities were calm and tranquil, and no one was searching for the murderer of the monarch. Naturally, Lin Shui's ship was also unimpeded. For a month, they passed through 7 counties and did not encounter any trouble or danger. Along the way, left emissary Jin and right emissary Blood Dragon worked together to control the divine ship. Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, Shui Huan, and the rest all stayed in their rooms to meditate and cultivate. Shui Huan did not appear much and had been busy adapting to his new divine body and cultivating some divine abilities that he had never cultivated before. Lin Shui had nothing to do and would always run to Ji Tianxing's room to disturb him. One moment she would chat with him and the next moment she would ask him questions. Ji Tianxing was so annoyed that he could only criticize her with righteous words. "Don't think that just because you broke through to the 8th level of the divine sovereign realm, you are the strongest among us. You just broke through not long ago and your divine Tao foundation is not stable. Even the divine ability you've cultivated hasn't reached the point of perfection. Once we encounter danger, what will you use to protect everyone and help me?" Lin Shui was a little dazed from being lectured and subconsciously asked, "What do you want to do?" Ji Tianxing said with a straight face, "If you have so much free time, you should cultivate properly and consolidate your divine Tao foundation. Also, the 1,000-star flying moon, illusory blood, heavenly blade. And these divine abilities that you cultivate have flaws and must be improved." He pointed out the flaws of several divine abilities and told her how to improve them. Lin Shui was stunned by him and her eyes were filled with surprise. She pouted angrily and muttered, "So be it, why are you so fierce?" Then, under Ji Tianxing's stern gaze, she turned and left unhappily. From then on, she really stayed in the secret room to cultivate and never disturbed Ji Tianxing again. This made Ji Tianxing secretly happy, thinking that he would use this trick to deal with Shui Lin in the future. But his happiness didn't last long. And NBS friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. A month later, Shui Lin came to him excitedly. "Kid, I've fixed all the flaws in the divine abilities you mentioned. Can you help me take a look and see if there are any problems?" She didn't care about anything else as she sat beside Ji Tianxing and focused on casting her divine ability. Ji Tianxing was very helpless. He pulled her sleeve and reminded her, "Hey, if you think there's no problem then it's fine. You don't need me to help you." Shui Lin hurriedly stopped and frowned. "All right, then can you help me take a look and see if there are any other techniques that need improvement?" Ji Tianxing pointed at his feet and said, "Can we talk about this later? We're at the border of the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom. We're about to pass through the God-bearing mountain range. Everyone needs to be careful." Seeing his serious expression and serious tone, Shui Lin gave up the idea. "All right, then we'll talk about it later." After all, she also knew that the God-bearing mountain range was an extremely dangerous place. Even a divine monarch powerhouse might die if they encountered danger in the mountain range. This mountain range with a radius of tens of millions of miles was located between the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom and the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. It was a natural division of power. At the same time, it was also one of the most dangerous forbidden areas in the surrounding divine kingdoms. Tens of thousands of years ago, countless ancient divine beasts lived in this dangerous mountain range. There were all kinds of fierce and powerful beasts. There were even some rare races left from the ancient era that hid in the depths of the mountain range. 10,000 years ago, the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom rose up. The God-bearing mountain range became a buffer between the three divine kingdoms. Many vicious divine race powerhouses that were hunted by various divine kingdoms also escaped into the God-bearing mountain range. Some hid in seclusion, while others built their forces and formed henchmen. As a result, the divine race that passed through the God-bearing mountain range not only had to endure the attacks of ancient divine beasts, but they also had to be on guard against the persecution of the vicious divine race. Over time, the God-bearing mountain range's notoriety spread far and wide, and it became a forbidden area. Ji Tianxing had already investigated the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom and the entire Great Yan Empire. He didn't know the God-bearing mountain range like the back of his hand, but he was quite clear about it. For Xuelin knew this too. When she left the Celestial Beast Empire and came to the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, she had also passed through the God-bearing mountain range. She had encountered many dangers in the depths of the mountain range. Therefore she didn't know. Take care of your eyes after reading for a long time. Translator, Atlas Studios editor. Atlas Studios. She didn't dare to let down her guard. However, she didn't have any intention of leaving. She sat beside Ji Tianxing and released her divine sense to observe the situation ahead. Ji Tianxing had no choice but to persuade him, "Hey, go tell everyone to stop cultivating for now. We're about to pass through the God-bearing mountain range. Tell everyone to stay alert." "I'm not, hey. Call me sister." Xuelin glared at him before getting up and leaving. Then she went to the secret rooms and woke up everyone who was still cultivating. Ji Tianxing was still sitting in the secret room, silently releasing his divine sense to check the surroundings. The sun was setting in the west. The divine ship was like a jet of black light, cutting through the white sea of clouds and heading south. Under the sea of clouds was the vast God-bearing mountain range. As far as the eye could see, there were dark green mountains thousands of feet tall, exuding a vast and powerful aura. Between the mountain peaks were deep valleys and ravines. Flocks of divine birds were constantly flying through the mountains. In the distance, the roars of beasts kept coming. In the first few hours, they were still at the edge of the God-bearing mountain range and weren't too dangerous. However, in the middle of the night, the divine ship entered the heart of the mountain range and entered the dangerous area. The birds and beasts all around disappeared. Under the night sky, the mountains appeared especially quiet. Suddenly, Ji Tianxing's divine sense detected hundreds of dangerous auras hiding in the mountains in front of them, to the left and to the right. This result made him more awake. He frowned and revealed a vigilant look. Could it be that we've encountered an ambush? He used divine sense to investigate carefully again and discovered that those several hundred hibernating divine power fluctuations were not divine race powerhouses. They were all kinds of strange divine beasts and mutated beasts. The number was as many as 300 over. They were basically all at the 9th level celestial deity realm or 1st or 2nd level divine lord realm strength. Although Ji Tianxing had long known that there were massive numbers of divine beasts living in the God-bearing mountain range. But the current situation was very abnormal. Those divine lord realm divine beasts were all leaders of their respective beast packs. They should be very proud. How could they possibly gather together? Furthermore, several hundred divine beasts were getting along peacefully, hibernating in the dark, appearing well-trained. This was most likely controlled by a powerhouse, right? Chapter 3095. By the time Ji Tianxing figured out the situation, they were only 10,000 miles away from the divine beast. At this moment, the 300-odd divine beasts seemed to have received an order. They no longer lay dormant and flew out of the darkness, charging into the sky as fast as lightning. The 300-odd divine beasts spread out in a fan-shaped formation. Each divine beast was 10 miles apart, forming an encirclement that was more than 3,000 miles wide. Their target was obvious. They were coming for the divine warship. The left emissary Jean and right emissary Blood Dragon also discovered the group of divine beasts and were shocked. If they continued to fly forward, they would plunge into the encirclement of the divine beasts. The most important thing now was to stop the divine warship and change its direction to avoid them. The two of them hurriedly cast spells to control the array of the divine warship. However, this required some time. The divine warship also continued to fly forward for a long time due to its huge inertia. This caused the divine worship and the divine beast to get closer. Swoosh. After 3 breaths, the divine worship finally stopped moving forward and turned to fly northwest, trying to avoid the divine beasts. However, the divine beasts were only 3,000 miles away from the divine worship. In the night sky in the northwest direction, more than a dozen dazzling beams of divine light suddenly lit up. They condensed into light blades that could split heaven and earth and slash down. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Each light blade was 10,000 feet long and carried the power to destroy everything as it enveloped a radius of 100 miles. The divine worship could not dodge in time and was immediately drowned by the divine light. Boom, boom, boom. A deafening explosion reverberated between heaven and earth, breaking the silence of the night. The black divine worship, which was 10,000 feet long, trembled from the bombardment and was on the verge of collapse. Even though the divine worship did not suffer any substantial damage. However, 2 layers of the defensive array on the surface were destroyed, and more than a dozen divine cannons on both sides were also broken. This result made Lin Shui realize that the dozen over people who attacked were all Divine Lord realm powerhouses. Moreover, they were all at least middle-level divine lords. Swoosh. The divine worship shook violently for dozens of times before it stabilized in the night sky. Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong and the others were all startled awake. Everyone stood in the meeting hall and used their divine senses to observe the situation outside. More than 300 divine beasts were rapidly approaching from the south. When they were 100 miles away from the divine worship, they all stopped advancing and began to close in on the encirclement. In the northern night sky there were also 13 figures flying over. They were 13 Sir God powerhouses. There were men and women, old and young, and they all had different appearances and attire. The strongest person in the lead was a burly man who was 10 meters tall and looked like a tall tower. This person was from the 4-winged god race. He had 4 dark red bone wings on his back. His hands and feet were like the sharp claws of a ferocious beast. His entire body was dark red and he wore black armor with a large purple cape draped over his shoulders. A huge bald head shone brightly in the night, flickering with dark red blood light. This person's divine power was incomparably violent. His aura was as vigorous as the sea, causing people to be intimidated at the sight of him. Xuelin could not help but frown. She whispered to the crowd, "That Baldy is much stronger than me. I'm in the 8th stage realm and he should be in the 9th stage realm." Everyone was silent. They used their divine senses to size up the other 12 people. The 12 Sir Gods with different appearances were all lined up in a row in the sky. There was a white-haired old man, a middle-aged man who was as strong as a bear, a good-looking woman and 2 unruly youths. The 3 strongest people were in the 8th stage of the Sir God realm. The 5 weakest people were in the 6th stage of the Sir God realm. These 13 Sir God powerhouses were a very powerful force. None of the major sects and forces in the Bloody Blaze Divine Kingdom had such a luxurious lineup. Lin Shui frowned and thought for a while. She instantly guessed the answer. They should be from the Heavenly Sect. Only the number 1 Sir God realm, the Heavenly Sect, has such a terrifying force. Upon hearing this answer, Zhen Hong, Shui Huan left emissary Jin, and the others were all fearful. Their expressions became very solemn. The Heavenly Sect? The number 1 sect in the Divine Kingdom? I heard that the Heavenly Sect is different from us. They are one of the top forces in the entire Great Yan Empire. That's right. These people should be from the Bloody Blaze Divine Kingdom's branch. Apart from the Bloody Blaze Divine Kingdom, the Heavenly Sect has branches in all the other Divine Kingdoms. Just as everyone was discussing animatedly, Ji Tianxing's figure flashed and left the divine worship, flying into the night sky. He stood in front of the divine worship and looked at the people from the Heavenly Sect expressionlessly. The gazes of the 13 Sir God powerhouses immediately gathered on him. The corners of many people's mouths and eyes revealed mocking sneers. At the same time, the last trace of doubt in everyone's hearts was immediately dispelled. Before Ji Tianxing appeared, they were all somewhat worried in their hearts. What if the target of the ambush was wrong? What if the target was not in that divine worship? Now the facts proved that the sect master was very wise. Both sides looked at each other and were silent for a while. The bald Sir God in the lead opened his mouth and said in a powerful voice, "Let me introduce myself. I am Long Fun, the current sect master of the Heavenly Sect's Bloody Blaze branch." Sir, I have been waiting for you here for a long time. Ji Tianxing was expressionless as he said in a cold tone, You are indeed from the heavenly sect. Where is Prince Lian? Why is he nowhere to be seen when you are lying in ambush here? Could it be that he is afraid of me and does not dare to show himself because he is afraid of losing his life? The bald Long Fen was not angry and said with a calm expression, To tell you the truth, the young prince was seriously injured and has been in seclusion to recuperate. He has not come out yet. However, the young prince missed you too much and expected that you would quietly escape the bloody blaze divine kingdom after the limelight passed. So, the little prince specially instructed this seat to wait for you here. At this point, Long Fen grinned coldly and said, The young prince repeatedly instructed me not to leave you alive. No matter what, I must kill you. Even if we die together, we will still profit. It was obvious that Prince Lian had given the order to kill. Long Fen and the 12 heavenly sect powerhouses all bore a heavy responsibility. Even if they had to die together with Ji Tianxing, they had to complete the mission. Ji Tianxing nodded and said with an indifferent expression, I have long expected this day and knew that I could not avoid it. Since you are so upright, I admire you very much and will send you to the Yellow Springs. As for those ugly and dirty divine beasts, let them all go. They are just a bunch of cannon fodder and will only dirty my hands. Long Fen raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, The master of those divine beasts is not me. You should talk to the left protector. As his voice fell, a black-robed old woman with a snake-headed walking stick walked out from behind him. This old woman is Yu, also known as Granny Beast Tamer. Greetings, young Master Tianxing. Granny Beast Tamer bowed slightly and said with a dry and hoarse voice, Those divine beasts are my friends and I see them as my nephews. Young Master despises them so much because you are afraid that they will tear you to pieces? Chapter 3096. Under the wide black robe was an ugly face covered in scars. Granny Beast Tamer opened her mouth with missing front teeth and revealed a sinister smile. She looked even more ferocious and terrifying. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but frown and sneer. Since you're so stubborn, don't blame me for being ruthless. I'll chop them into minced meat later and barbecue them. I'll let you have a good taste. Hee. Granny Beast Tamer sneered even more sinisterly. That's a good idea. I'll cook you like this later. After saying that, she turned around with her walking stick and retreated behind Long Fen. Long Fen stared at Ji Tianxing and sneered, Since we've already greeted each other, let's not waste any more time. Let your scoundrel friends come out and die together. Don't try to resist. It's useless. I've already investigated your background. Since I dared to ambush you here, I'm fully confident that I can catch all of you in one fell swoop. He's so confident. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a mocking sneer as killing intent burst out from his body. It just so happens that I've comprehended a few new divine powers. I'll use you as a test. As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing used his divine powers and instantly turned into a golden armored god of war that was 10,000 feet tall. He didn't hide his strength. He used the celestial dragon tyrant body right away and went all out. A dazzling golden light illuminated a radius of thousands of miles. The supreme divine power that suppressed heaven and earth sealed off an area of 10,000 miles. He held the divine seal with both hands and erupted with endless divine power as he pointed at the sky. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Instantly, more than 10,000 golden light spots appeared in the distant sky. Each golden light was like a meteor falling, pouring down toward this part of the world. Before the golden light arrived, a terrifying sword intent that could suppress everything enveloped a radius of 10,000 miles. Without a doubt, this was the heaven-destroying sword formation. The golden light that filled the sky descended rapidly. Everyone could clearly see that it was more than 10,000 incomparably huge divine golden swords. Long Fen and Granny Beast Tamer couldn't help but frown. The 11 heavenly sect experts also stopped sneering and their expressions became solemn. Everyone could feel the immense pressure and their confidence quickly dissipated. Granny Beast Tamer didn't hesitate any longer. She hurriedly wielded her snake-headed walking stick and performed a strange secret magic. 200 miles away, the more than 300 divine beasts suddenly became bloodthirsty and berserk. Their eyes were bloodshot and emitted flames. Roar. 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 All the mythological beasts roared furiously and recklessly rushed towards Ji Tianxing. Clearly, Granny Beast Tamer had given the order to the divine beasts. They had locked onto Ji Tianxing and were determined to tear him to pieces at all costs. Swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, more than 26 winged divine birds as large as palaces rushed to Ji Tianxing as fast as they could. They all stretched out their razor-sharp claws and clawed at Ji Tianxing. It then used its sharp, spear-like beak to viciously stab Ji Tianxing's vital points. The sharp claws and beaks of these second-level divine monarch realm six-winged divine birds were comparable to monarch-level divine artifacts. Their combat power was very strong. Soon Ji Tianxing's figure was drowned and was about to be torn apart by the divine birds. Instead he unhurriedly waved his palms and unleashed dozens of five-colored sword lights. Swish, 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 kaboom, rumble. Those dozens of five-colored sword lights not only contained a few types of divine power, but they also contained the violent power of divine thunder. When they pierced or slashed those divine birds, there was a deafening explosion and feathers and flesh flew all over the sky. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 divine birds were blasted into pieces, and blood rained all over the sky. They were the fastest to charge, but they were also the first to die. But this horrifying scene couldn't intimidate those bloodthirsty divine beasts. Many mountain-sized demon bulls, silver-winged wolves, raging flame leopards, and flying tigers were still charging over fearlessly. There were even a few venomous pythons that looked like giant dragons that sprayed poisonous fog that covered the sky, shrouding the divine worship in Ji Tianxing. Fortunately, the Heaven Punishment Sword Array was finally formed. Swish, 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 swish. More than 10,000 divine giant swords sealed off an area of 10,000 miles, like a huge golden canopy that suppressed everything. The dazzling sword light flew back and forth in the sky, releasing a violent sword intent. Only muffled bangs could be heard and they exploded in the sky one after another. Immediately, dozens of divine beasts with huge bodies were cut into pieces by the divine giant swords that filled the sky, and blood rained all over the sky. Moreover, the Heaven Punishment Sword Array released an invisible suppressive force that slowed down the charging speed of many divine beasts by more than half. Their speed suddenly slowed down and their momentum also weakened a little. But they were already bloodthirsty and crazy and they didn't know what fear was. Even if divine beasts were killed by the sword lights every second, and turned into pieces and blood raining all over the sky, they weren't affected at all and continued to charge at Ji Tianxing and the others without any regard for their own safety. Swish. At this time Lin Shui put away the divine ship and Shi Zhenhong and the others all appeared in the night sky. Everyone fought together with Ji Tianxing, forming a defensive circle around each other, and together they resisted the attacks of many divine beasts. Evil beasts die. Damned beasts go to hell. Shui Huan, Gold Left Emissary and Blood Dragon Right Emissary all roared with murderous intent. They waved their sabers and Kenshin weapons, releasing superpower light shadows all over the sky. Zhen Hong unleashed all of his strength, and directly entered a berserk state, turning into a dragon-shaped war goddess that was thousands of feet tall. Her whole body burned with bloody flames, exuding a dragon aura that could shake heaven and earth, and she fiercely attacked the group of divine beasts. The divine beasts had an innate respect and fear for the dragon and phoenix tribes. This originated from the nobility of the bloodline and the suppression of the soul level. This was the nature of the beasts and it was almost uncontrollable by reason. What's more, the more than 300 divine beasts were all bloodthirsty and berserk, and they had no sense of reason. When the invisible dragon aura released by Zhenhong engulfed those divine beasts, their boiling blood and killing intent seemed to have been splashed with a basin of cold water, and more than half of them instantly cooled down. Even the momentum of his charge was slowed down by a lot. Tyrant Dragon Killing Fist. Zhenhong roared, clenched his sharp dragon claws into fists, and instantly blasted out dozens of blood-colored fist shadows. With a series of loud bangs, more than 20 divine beasts exploded on the spot, and blood splattered all over the sky. Although Ji Tianxing, Zhenhong and the others were very weak in terms of numbers, their auras were even more powerful and berserk than the more than 300 divine beasts. In addition, the divine might of the heaven-destroying sword formation firmly suppressed the many divine beasts. For a moment, Ji Tianxing and the others were not in danger of losing their lives. After fighting for a while, more than 100 divine beasts were killed instantly. Seeing this scene, Granny Beast Tamer's heart ached so much that it dripped blood. She was so angry that her face was distorted. Longfen also frowned. With a gloomy expression, he waved his hand and ordered, "Everyone listen up. Go all out and kill Tianxing and his accomplices." Chapter 3097. The dozen or so experts of the He-Tian sect had long been unable to suppress their violent killing intent. They blocked the attacks of the sword lights while waiting for Long Fin's order. When Long Fin gave the order, everyone unleashed their most ferocious aura and let out a murderous roar. Everyone waved their divine weapons and charged at Ji Tianxing and the others. Dragon-slaying saber flash. Thousand Saint domineering saber. Thousand crack emperor extreme blade. 9 heaven imperial dragon star-slashing sword. 8 extremes destruction. All the Sir Gods unleashed their strongest attacks with all their might, releasing divine skill light shadows that blotted out the sky. The world within a few hundred miles was instantly enveloped by endless divine light and became chaotic. Ji Tianxing and the others were attacked from the front and back and were in an extremely dangerous situation. Lin Shui, Shui Huan, Zhen Hong, and the others all had extremely solemn expressions. Just the group of ferocious divine beasts alone was difficult for them to deal with. Moreover, the experts of the He-Tian sect were even more terrifying than the divine beast. If a miracle didn't happen, they would definitely lose this battle. Everyone would die here, torn to pieces by the people of the He-Tian sect and become food for the divine beasts. Dragon flames burning the sky. Long Fin rushed to the front. He opened his arms and waved his palms, releasing golden dragon flames that covered the sky and earth. The incomparably violent divine power, with an aura that could destroy everything, fiercely suppressed Ji Tianxing and the others. Among all the people present, he was the strongest. The power of this absolute skill was definitely terrifying beyond compare. The dragon flames that covered the sky like a torrential flood were enough to burn everyone to ashes. Before the dragon flames arrived, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others already felt a great pressure, and a strong sense of fear and dread arose in their hearts. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing stepped forward bravely. Zhoush. His figure flashed and faced Long Fin. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out with all his might. Rising dragon slash. He slashed out with his sword, but hundreds of sacred golden sword lights formed a wall of light that was 100 miles wide. Zhoush. The holy light wall was like a giant axe, instantly severing the sky. Between Ji Tianxing and Long Fin, 100-mile ravine was slashed open in the sky, like a pitch-black abyss. The dragon flames that blotted out the sky all rushed into the black abyss and were swallowed by the void. Even Long Fin and the experts of the He-Tian sect were blocked by the sacred light wall, unable to get close to Ji Tianxing and the others. This scene was as if space had been severed and the two sides were in different time and space. It was truly strange and mystical. Shuilin, Zhen Hong, and the others breathed a sigh of relief. They looked surprised and excited. As for Long Fin, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others, their expressions changed drastically as they revealed expressions of disbelief. How is this possible? He actually severed space. But, damn it. My connection with my children has been severed. What kind of divine ability is that? It can actually cut open the sky? It's too scary. Other than the legendary divine king, who else would have such terrifying divine might? Long Fin and the dozen or so Sir Gods were stunned. Granny Beast Tamer's mental connection with more than 200 divine beasts was also forcefully severed. No matter how she cast spells, she could not send out orders or control those divine beasts. As a result, those divine beasts had lost control and restraint. They no longer obeyed orders and rules and acted according to their violent nature. They roared angrily and charged forward without any order, crazily venting their killing fire. Bang bang bang. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The formation of the divine beasts was messed up, and they began to rampage, chasing after Ji Tianxing and the others and pestering them. The battlefield became chaotic. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Shuilin, Zhen Hong, and the others started a massacre, killing dozens of divine beasts in the chaos. Ji Tianxing also controlled the heaven-destroying sword formation, using thousands of giant swords to form a storm, engulfing the 200 divine beasts. The dazzling golden hurricane swept across the battlefield. Wherever it went, the divine beasts were swept up and immediately crushed into pieces, turning into dust and a rain of blood. In just 10 breaths, more than 100 divine beasts were killed. The remaining 120 divine beasts were also in chaos and mania, charging and killing chaotically. The pressure on Shui, Lin, Zhenhong and the others was greatly reduced, and they all heaved a sigh of relief. Ji Tianxing opened the divine tower again and summoned Yun Yao and Ji Ku. Swoosh! Swoosh! With a flash of silver moonlight, Yun Yao, who was wearing a white dress and looking incomparably holy, appeared. With a flash of crimson fire, Ji Ku, who was wearing a fiery red dress and holding the origin stone divine spear, also appeared beside Ji Tianxing. These two peerless beauties had already broken through to the Sir God realm and consolidated their foundation of the divine path. Now they were finally qualified to fight side by side with Ji Tianxing. It was their first time fighting and they were facing such a dangerous situation. However, they were fearless. They were very confident and their fighting spirit was high. 7 stars accompanying the moon. Yun Yao shouted softly. She held the origin stone divine sword in her hand and waved it towards the group of divine beasts not far away. Suddenly, a crescent moon appeared in the sky and 7 shooting stars fell from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. The light of the stars and moon fell on the group of divine beasts, creating a deafening sound and splashing bright moonlight all over the sky. Under such a beautiful scene, there was a terrifying killing power. More than a dozen mountain-sized divine beasts were all smashed and blood rained down from the sky. 7 flames of the burning god. Ji Ku turned into a shocking fire and waved the origin stone divine spear, splashing 7 colored divine flames into the group of divine beasts. Swoosh! 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 The 7 colored divine flames covered the group of divine beasts. After the flames flashed, more than 30 divine beasts disappeared, leaving only black ashes floating in the sky. Although everyone could see that Yun Yao and Ji Ku were first-level Sir God realm. Their powerful combat strength was not inferior to Zhenhong, Shui Huan, Left Emissary Jin and the others. Moreover, their peerless beauty was as dazzling as the sun and moon in the 9 heavens. At this moment, everyone was stunned and their eyes were focused on the 2 of them. Shui Huan, Left Emissary Jin and Blood Dragon Right Emissary all had stunned expressions and couldn't help but exclaim. Oh my god! There are such beautiful women in this world. This is unbelievable. Their beauty is soul-stirring. Even when they kill a group of divine beasts they don't show the slightest bit of anger. What a stunning beauty! What kind of perfect man is worthy of them? The 3 men didn't think much of it. They were just stunned. However, Lin Shui and Zhenhong's mood was a little strange. Zhenhong looked at Yun Yao and Ji Ku in a daze, and a sense of inferiority flashed in his heart. He murmured silently, such perfect beauties are enough to make any woman stunned and envious. They should be the 2 wives that the young master mentioned before, right? No wonder young Mistress Wushuang is so beautiful and cute. Probably only peerless beauties like them can give birth to a fairy like Wushuang. At this moment, Zhenhong suddenly felt that young Master Tianxing and these 2 beauties were a match made in heaven, a perfect match. And it was enough for her to stay by the young master's side and be a dutiful maid. Mobile version update website. Chapter 3098. Just like Zhenhong, Lin Shui had mixed feelings. However, her state of mind and thoughts were somewhat different. Lin Shui looked at Yun Yao and Ji Ku's figures with a trace of envy in her eyes. She muttered to herself, even women are stunned by them but they won't be jealous. Previously I thought that the kid was pretending to be a noble and virtuous man. Now that I think about it, it's no wonder that he's so arrogant and indifferent to all kinds of beauties. With 2 such peerless beauties as his wives, he has no regrets or pursuits in life, right? Soon everyone came back to their senses. Although Yun Yao and Ji Ku's combat strength was outstanding, the 2 of them were weak. How could they fight against hundreds of divine beasts? Lin Shui, Zhenhong and the others couldn't let the 2 of them fight alone. Everyone rushed into the battlefield and fought side by side with Yun Yao and Ji Ku, joining forces to fight against the violent divine beasts. The situation was temporarily stable. Ji Tianxing's figure flashed and strangely passed through the sacred light wall, arriving on the other side of the spatial rift. The dozen or so divine lords of the He-Tian sect wanted to go around the light wall that was thousands of miles wide and attack Ji Tianxing and the others. Long Fun and Granny Beast Tamer were still attacking with all their might, crazily bombarding the sacred light wall. However, the golden light barrier was still intact after taking dozens of attacks from the divine abilities. It did not budge at all. At this moment, Ji Tianxing took the initiative to rush over. Long Fun, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others immediately found their target and surrounded him with sinister smiles. Little bastard, you're courting death. I was just about to cross that golden light and kill you on the other side. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to me. Kid, you're really arrogant and conceited. Reckless thing, I'll kill you now. Long Fun, Granny Beast Tamer, and the three elders all used all kinds of divine abilities to besiege Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing's figure was drowned by the overwhelming divine spell light and the colorful sword light and saber light. He was in the heavenly dragon tyrant body state. His body was 10,000 feet tall and shining with golden light. If the target was too big, it would naturally be easier to fall into the trap. However, he didn't dodge. Instead, he put his palms together and expressionlessly used his ultimate technique. Limitless Chaos. Following his furious roar, his entire body burst forth with dazzling 5-colored divine light, and his entire body became illusory and blurry. The 5-colored divine light contained more than a dozen divine Dao laws. Heaven, earth, 5 elements, stars, space, and other powers fused together perfectly. This was the ultimate skill that Ji Tianxing had mastered when he was cultivating in seclusion. This technique was derived from the chaotic heaven secret technique and was a top-notch defensive divine ability. Think about it, the various defensive techniques in this world were nothing more than strengthening oneself and resisting the enemy's attacks. Or he could use some techniques and methods to neutralize the enemy's attack power. As for this endless sky of chaos, it was even more profound and unfathomable. After Ji Tianxing used it, his body became illusory without a physical existence. No matter how powerful the attacks of Long Fun and the others were, they could not touch his true body. The power of various divine abilities and secret techniques would also be absorbed by heaven, earth, 5 elements, stars, and space. No matter how strong the divine lords were, could they destroy heaven, earth, stars, space, and 5 elements? Obviously not. Swoosh, swoosh. In the next moment, the saber light, sword shadows, and divine abilities that blotted out the sky passed through Ji Tianxing without any delay and scattered between heaven and earth. Ji Tianxing's figure still existed, unharmed. The ground below, the surrounding space, and the entire heaven-destroying sword formation were also unaffected. However, those divine abilities collapsed and dissipated, absorbed by heaven, earth, stars, and space. Such a strange scene caused Long Fun, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others to be stunned with astonishment. They were dumbfounded as if they had seen a ghost. No matter what, they couldn't understand how Ji Tianxing did it. What the hell? Damn it. How could this be? That kid is too strange. Everyone be careful. I don't believe that I can't kill him. This must be an illusion. Yes. That kid is very cunning. He must have used some kind of illusion. The few experts did not believe it. They waved their divine weapons again and used their powerful divine abilities and killing moves. Rumble. The saber light and sword shadows that filled the sky descended again, drowning Ji Tianxing like a monstrous flood. However, the strange scene reappeared again. Countless saber light and sword shadows passed through Ji Tianxing's body and landed on the ground. Of course, the ground wasn't cut into a ravine or a deep pit. Those divine abilities and secret skills collapsed one after another, turning into endless divine light and quickly dissipating. This result made Long Fun, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others' hands and feet turn cold. Their eyes were full of shock. Everyone was shocked and frightened, and they were at a loss. Damn it! What the hell is going on? How can there be such a strange divine ability in the world? How did he do it? This is definitely not an illusion. Everyone, don't waste your energy. Calm down, everyone must calm down. Let's think of a way together. We'll definitely be able to break his divine ability. The few Sir God powerhouses calmed down very quickly as they used their ultimate techniques and secret skills to check Ji Tianxing's situation. Someone used a soul secret skill to investigate Ji Tianxing's soul aura. Someone used a mysterious eye technique to see through Ji Tianxing's background. There were also people who used the spatial law to break the golden light barrier. This was because they felt that Ji Tianxing's strangeness was related to the sacred light wall. At this moment, the other experts of the He Tian sect also returned to Long Fun's side. They couldn't wait any longer and immediately wanted to besiege Ji Tianxing. However, Long Fun stopped them. He pointed at Ji Tianxing and explained the situation to everyone. That kid is very strange. I don't know what kind of divine ability he used, but he's actually like nothingness. No matter how we attack, he's not affected. The other Sir Gods were also very shocked and found it hard to believe. Someone attacked Ji Tianxing and found that it was useless. This proved that Longfen was right. Therefore, the dozen or so Sir Gods stopped attacking and surrounded Ji Tianxing to observe carefully, trying to find a flaw. Ji Tianxing was very calm. He stood in the sky expressionlessly with his palms together and maintained the posture of circulating his energy. This was the first time he used the infinite sky of turbidity. He was also testing how long this divine ability could be maintained and how powerful an attack it could withstand. Seeing that Long Fun and the others had stopped, he frowned in dissatisfaction and said in a contemptuous and provocative tone, "You bastards of the He-Tian sect, weren't you very arrogant before? Why are you so timid? I just used a little trick and you're scared out of your wits? Is that all you can do? More than a dozen people can't do anything to me? Prince Lian must be very depressed to have a group of trash like you as his trusted aides, right?" The experts of the He-Tian sect finally calmed down. They were provoked by Ji Tianxing's words and immediately flew into a rage. They roared and attacked again. Chapter 3099. Kid, you must be tired of living. If I don't tear you to pieces, I'll have lived in vain. Since you're so eager to die, I'll fulfill your wish. You're invincible. Kid, you're already on the path of invincibility. The experts of He-Tian sect cursed furiously. They waved their sabers and Kenshin soldiers, besieging Ji Tianxing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The colorful brilliance of the divine skill once again covered the sky and poured down like a torrential flood. This time, the 13 experts of He-Tian sect attacked at the same time, erupting with their strongest combat power. The power of their combined attack actually reached the limit of a Sir God, very close to a God King expert. Even a peak 9th Heaven Divine Lord would be severely injured by it. Ji Tianxing remained unmoved. A satisfied smile flashed across his eyes, and his heart surged with anticipation. Swoosh. The scene from before appeared once again. The earth-shattering divine skill passed through Ji Tianxing without any hindrance and scattered between heaven and earth. Very soon it collapsed and dissipated. The experts of He-Tian sect once again failed to injure Ji Tianxing. Everyone was so angry that they were stamping with rage, but at the same time they felt helpless. If Ji Tianxing maintained his incorporeal state, he would be invincible. They could not injure Ji Tianxing at all, let alone kill him. What should they do? Ji Tianxing was very satisfied with this result and revealed a gratified smile. This move, Infinite Sky of Chaos, is indeed mysterious and unparalleled. Its power is superb. I clearly felt that just now I've already reached the limit of my defense. If their attack power was a little stronger, they might have injured me. This is enough to prove that the limit of Infinite Sky of Chaos is the limit of a Sir God. As long as I use this divine skill, only God King experts can injure me. These thoughts flashed across Ji Tianxing's mind. He had already tested the effect of Infinite Sky of Chaos and the limit of his defense power. With this life-saving trump card, he could do whatever he wanted under the God King realm in the future. Of course, even if he didn't cultivate this divine ability, he still had the Heaven Mending Pearl, the Blood Flame Sacred Tree, and the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda. He could still do whatever he wanted. At this moment, on the other side of the Golden Barrier, the battle between Yunyao, Jiku, and the others and the Divine Beast was coming to an end. Just now, in the span of 100 breaths, they had actually joined forces to kill over 100 divine beasts. Just a moment ago, the sky was filled with divine beasts the size of mountains. At this moment, the sky was actually very clean. Other than Yunyao, Jiku, and Lin Shui, there was only a rain of blood falling from the sky. Everyone's situation was very good. Basically, no one was injured, but they had used up quite a bit of divine power. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing hurriedly used a divine ability to remove the 1,000-mile-wide Golden Barrier. Shwa. After the Golden Barrier disappeared, the pitch-black abyss that separated the sky quickly healed as well. Within the heaven-destroying sword formation, the space within a 10,000-mile radius was restored to its original state. Yunyao, Jiku, Lin Shui, and the others were worried about Ji Tianxing's situation and hurriedly rushed to his side. At this moment, he also stopped using the Infinite Sky of Chaos and returned to his true form from his illusory state. Shwa. Yunyao, Jiku, and the others surrounded him and looked at him with concern. Tianxing, are you all right? Brother Tianxing, so many people surrounded you just now. Are you injured? Ji Tianxing waved his hand, indicating that everyone didn't have to worry. Everyone secretly heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that he was unharmed. He was now the backbone of everyone. If anything happened to him, it would shake everyone's will and determination. Ji Tianxing held the Burial of Heaven sword in his hand and pointed at Long Fen, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others. He sneered and said, "The divine beasts you controlled have all been killed. Now it's your turn to die." Long Fen, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others stared at him with vigilance. Their faces were as cold as ice and their bodies were filled with killing intent. Not only were the two of them solemn, but the right protector and the few elders also had ugly expressions. Everyone realized that Ji Tianxing's combat strength was stronger than they had imagined. Prince Lian had once said that he had exchanged thousands of blows with Ji Tianxing and had always been suppressing Ji Tianxing. That meant that Ji Tianxing's true strength was inferior to Prince Lian, who was at the 9th level Divine Lord realm. But the current situation was clearly very wrong. Not to mention Prince Lian, even Long Fen, who had a stronger foundation, was not a match for Ji Tianxing. What was going on? In just a short month, Ji Tianxing had broken through again and his strength had soared? Long Fen, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others shuddered just thinking about it. However, there were still a few weaker elders who did not see any clues. They were still immersed in the strength and transcendent status of the Xianxia sect and looked down on Ji Tianxing and the others as usual. A red-haired youth grinned coldly and said, "Kid, although that divine ability of yours is very strange and you were not injured at all after being besieged by us for so long, but you must have used up a lot of divine power to use that divine ability. Now you finally can't hold on and obediently stand out to be beaten, right?" Another green-haired woman holding a divine bow also sneered with a sinister expression and said, "Although the divine beasts controlled by the left protector are all dead, it's no big deal. Those 300 over divine beasts were just cannon fodder that she gathered at the last minute in the god-bearing mountain range. Our Xianxia sect's experts have come out in full force. Killing you is as easy as flipping our hands." There was even a strong young man who was like a black bear who shouted with a sinister smile, "Tianxing, if you're still a man, surrender and die yourself. Don't implicate others. Look at your companions, those 4 rare beauties. They were implicated by you and died, turning into minced dregs. What a waste of God's gifts. As long as you surrender, we can consider sparing the 4 of them." Hearing the words of the 3 young elders, Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Lin Shui, and the others all had cold eyes and strong killing intent. Even Long Fen, Granny Beast Tamer, and a few of the older elders frowned and revealed astonished expressions. They didn't expect the 3 young elders to be so short-sighted. They did not realize that the situation had been reversed and they were in a dangerous situation. Ji Tianxing spoke. He secretly shook his head and glanced at the 3 young elders with eyes full of sympathy. His tone was full of pity as he said, "You are so stupid, but you can live until today and even become the elders of the Xianxia sect. This really puzzles me. Perhaps it's a kind of happiness for you to continue being so stupid." No matter how stupid the 3 young elders were, they could sense that the atmosphere was not right. They were ashamed and angry, but they did not dare to flare up on the spot. They hurriedly looked at Long Fen, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others with inquiring eyes. Their expressions seemed to be saying, "What's going on? Weren't we sure of victory and could easily kill Tianxing? Why do you all look so guilty and worried? Could it be that your overflowing confidence and aggressiveness before the operation were all fake? But we took it seriously." Chapter 3100. The 3 young elders had yet to recover from their shock. Ji Tianxing did not waste any more time. He formed a seal with his left hand and controlled the heaven-destroying sword array to attack. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Thousands of divine golden swords, with an indestructible power, slashed toward the experts of the Xianxia sect. Every sword light was like a meteor. When thousands of sacred golden swords gathered together, it was like a gorgeous meteor shower. The 13 experts from the Xianxia sect were instantly drowned by the brilliant sword light and were suppressed by the violent sword essence. Long Fen, Granny Beast Tamer, and the others' expressions changed drastically. They quickly fought back and resisted. Even the young elders turned pale with fright. They tried their best to use their divine abilities and consummate skills to block the sword light that filled the sky. They finally understood the reason when they felt the power of the sacred golden swords. No wonder the sect master and the guardians looked so pale. Boom, 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 boom. The sword light that filled the sky came crashing down. A deafening sound burst out and resounded through the sky. Everyone was enveloped by the dazzling sacred golden swords. The few young elders were relatively weaker. After blocking the sword light for a few dozen times, they were injured by the sacred golden swords. They screamed and flew out, spilling blood all over the sky. Once they started to get injured, they would reveal their flaws and gaps. More sacred golden swords would attack, making it harder for them to block. Only Long Fin, Granny Beast Tamer, and the Right Guardian could block the attack of the sacred golden swords and were not injured. After all, the 3 of them were above the 8th degree realm. The other 10 elders were all 7th and 6th heaven realms or gods. They could not block for long before they were injured by the sacred golden swords. Hideous wounds appeared on their bodies and blood spilled all over the ground. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yun Yao, Jiku, Lin Shui, and the others all performed their remarkable skills and launched a fierce attack on the experts from the Xian sect. Demon Blood Sky/Blade. Lin Shui held the demon sword and rushed out first, slashing out blood-red sword light that filled the sky. Heavenly Star 9 Swords. World-burning God Annihilation. Yun Yao and Jiku were also very brave. They brandished the Source Stone Divine Sword and Divine Halberd, splashing out sword light and divine flames that covered the sky. Raging Dragon Storm Fist. Zhen Hong, who was thousands of meters tall, also blasted out an incomparably violent fist aura with surging blood flames. Shui Huan, Gold Left Emissary, and Blood Dragon Right Emissary also used their ultimate skills. The God Lord powerhouses of Xian sect were all filled with grief and indignation. They had no choice but to counterattack with all their might. Thus the final battle began. The numerous Divine Lord powerhouses launched a fierce clash within the Heaven Extermination Sword formation. The colorful divine spells collided with each other in the sky, creating deafening noises. Destructive divine power shockwaves spread out like ripples, covering a radius of 10,000 miles. Billions of shards of divine light fell from the sky like snowflakes and sprinkled on the battlefield. Everyone dashed forward without any regard for their own safety, doing their best and using their trump cards. There was no victory or defeat in this battle, only life and death. Long Fin, who was the strongest, stared at Ji Tianxing and charged forward with all his might. Ji Tianxing relied on his strong defense and endless divine power to fight him head-on. He was not at a disadvantage at all. The 2 of them exchanged a few hundred blows, but Long Fin was still unable to kill Ji Tianxing. On the other hand, his entire body was covered in wounds and dripping with divine blood. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, was only slightly injured. His divine power was still abundant, and his combat strength was maintained at peak condition. Seeing this, the Right Guardian and Granny Beast Tamer hurried to help. The 2 of them fought side by side with Long Fin and joined forces to attack Ji Tianxing. In this way, they finally suppressed Ji Tianxing and gained a slight upper hand. However, Ji Tianxing quickly stabilized himself with the help of the Heaven Extermination Sword formation. After the 2 of them exchanged 1,000 blows, he stabilized the situation and fought to a draw with Long Fin and the other 2. The 4 of them fought with each other and were constantly injured. As time passed, their injuries continued to worsen, and their strength was rapidly draining. However, Ji Tianxing's self-healing ability was extremely strong, and with the divine power provided by the Heaven Mending Pearl, his strength was endless. The longer this battle dragged on, the more obvious his advantage became. On the other side, Yun Yao, Jiku, Lin Shui, and the others fought against the 10 elders of the Xian sect. Originally, they could not defeat the elders of the Xian sect. Only Lin Shui and Godlord Blood Illusion had the strongest combat strength, reaching the 8th level of the Divine Lord realm. The other's strength was lower than the elders of the Xian sect. However, Lin Shui and Godlord Blood Illusion worked together to hold back the 5 elders of the Xian sect and were not at a disadvantage. Zhen Hong, Yun Yao, Jiku Left Emissary Jin, and Blood Dragon Right Emissary dealt with the other 5 elders with all their might. The 5 elders were suppressed by the Heaven Extermination Sword formation and were already heavily injured. Their combat strength was greatly reduced. As such, Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others were able to cope and gradually gained the upper hand. After both sides fought for 15 minutes, Zhen Hong took the lead and killed a young elder. Then Yun Yao used her supreme divine power and secret skill to crush an elder into powder. The 5 of them had a great advantage against the remaining 3 elders. There was no suspense in the outcome. After both sides fought for 30 minutes, the three elders' divine bodies were destroyed. The severely injured divine sparks wanted to escape, but Jiku caught up with them and shattered two divine sparks on the spot. The other divine sparks were also stopped by left emissary Jin. Everyone worked together to shatter it. Through this battle, the five of them formed a tacit understanding. After a short rest, they went to help Lin Shui and God Lord Blood Illusion. Lin Shui and God Lord Blood Illusion were both injured. Their robes were stained with blood and they looked a little miserable. However, the five elders on the other side were not in a good condition either. Their robes were torn, their hair was disheveled, their faces were covered with blood, and their bodies were covered with wounds. The only fortunate thing was that the five elders were still alive. However, this outcome was about to be disrupted. As Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others joined the battle, the situation was completely overturned. 7 Sir God experts joined forces to besiege the 5 elders of Heaven Extermination sect. Moreover, the 5 elders were suppressed by the Heaven Extermination sword formation and were heavily injured. The outcome of this battle was beyond doubt. Of course, Yun Yao, Lin Shui, and the others were victorious. They killed the 5 elders one by one. Not only did they destroy their divine bodies, but even their divine sparks did not manage to escape. They were crushed into pieces on the spot. The earth-shattering battle of gods came to an end. Within a radius of 10,000 miles, all the mountains, rivers, and forests had been turned upside down and destroyed hundreds of times. At a glance, it had become a desert that was filled with ravines and abysses. Everyone channeled their powers to suppress their injuries and consumed divine elixirs to recover their divine power. Then they charged towards the sky energetically to help Ji Tianxing. They besieged Long Fun, Granny Beast Tamer, and the Right Guardian. At that moment, Ji Tianxing was still lightly injured. His fighting power was still very strong. As for Long Fun, Granny Beast Tamer, and the Right Guardian, their injuries were more serious. Their fighting power had decreased tremendously. When Yun Yao, Lin Shui, and the others joined the battle, the outcome was already decided. Chapter 3101. Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, Jiku, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others. A total of 8 Divine Lord powerhouses joined forces to attack Long Fun, Granny Beast Tamer, and the Right Guardian. In addition, the suppression of the heaven-destroying sword formation weakened the combat strength of Long Fun and the other 2. Therefore, this battle only lasted for an hour before it was declared to have ended. The first to be killed by everyone was Granny Beast Tamer. Her best ability was to control all kinds of divine beasts to help her in battle. However, those 300 divine beasts had already been destroyed by Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, and the others. This was equivalent to cutting off her fangs. Her combat strength was naturally greatly reduced. After Granny Beast Tamer was killed, Long Fun and the Right Guardian's situation became even more dangerous. Their injuries were even more miserable. Their hair was disheveled and their faces were dirty. Their bodies were covered in blood and wounds. Where was the demeanor of a powerhouse? In less than 15 minutes, the Right Guardian followed in Granny Beast Tamer's footsteps and was killed by everyone. Not only did his divine body collapse and return to the world, even his divine spark was cut into more than a dozen pieces and put away by Ji Tianxing. Only Long Fun was left to fight alone, resisting the siege of Ji Tianxing and the others. He was indeed worthy of being the sect master of the He-Tian sect, a 9th-level Divine Lord powerhouse. Not only was his divine power vigorous and long, but he had also mastered more than 140 divine Dao laws. Moreover, he was proficient in thousands of divine abilities and secret skills, and all kinds of killing moves were endless. Therefore, killing him was the most troublesome and difficult. Yun Yao, Jiku, Zhen Hong, Left Emissary Jin, and Blood Dragon Right Emissary were much weaker than Long Fun. It was very difficult for them to cause too much damage to Long Fun with their divine abilities and ultimate skills. Most of the attacks were neutralized by Long Fun. Even if a few divine abilities and secret skills hit Long Fun, they could only cause him some minor injuries. On the other hand, Long Fun's desperate counterattack caused Zhen Hong, Jiku, and the others to suffer different degrees of injuries. Helpless, they could only retreat to a distance to heal their injuries. The main force that truly dealt with Long Fun was Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, and Blood Illusion. As a result, the time dragged on for an exceptionally long time. After fighting for an entire hour, more than half of Long Fun's divine power was consumed, and his injuries were extremely serious. Only then did Ji Tianxing detonate the poison he had planted a long time ago. Following a muffled bang, Long Fin's divine body violently trembled as blood spurted out of his 7 orifices. The 3 types of poisons had been lurking in his body for an hour. It had already corroded his internal organs, meridians, god blood, and godhead. As a result, once it was triggered, it was unstoppable and directly destroyed his divine body. Under people's attentive gazes, his god body withered and corroded at a speed visible to the naked eye. He turned into black ashes and scattered in the sky. Only a single divine bead was left. It was also infected with dark green and dark blue poison, flickering with dim divine light. It was obvious that Long Fin's godhead had also been corroded by the poison, and he had suffered heavy injuries. His divine soul was extremely weak and his divine power was also extremely lacking. Ji Tianxing stared fixedly at the godhead. When he saw that the walnut-sized diamond-shaped godhead was covered in fine law runes, he was astonished. This Long Fin is really a pleasant surprise. There are actually more than 150 types of divine Tao laws fused in his godhead. No wonder his combat strength is so formidable. He was sealed by the heaven-exterminating sword formation, but he could still withstand our besiegement and hold on for so long. Ji Tianxing was certain that Long Fin was the strongest person he had encountered since coming to the divine realm. Even the top genius, Prince Lian, did not have as deep a foundation as Long Fin. His godhead, this lord wants it for sure. A cold light flashed across Ji Tianxing's eyes and he made up his mind. Following that, he, Lin Shui, and God Lord Blood Illusion attacked with all their might, besieging Long Fin's godhead. Long Fin was indeed powerful. Even if he only had one godhead left, he could still execute all sorts of divine abilities and secret skills, tenaciously resisting. Both sides exchanged dozens of blows, fighting until the sky turned dark. Fragments of divine light splattered everywhere. However, no matter how tenaciously Long Fin resisted, he was still fighting like a trapped beast. In the end, he still could not block the divine might of the Burial of Heaven sword and was hacked into pieces by the sword. A crisp cracking sound rang out. 12 godhead fragments flew out, scattering in the air. This scene drew a full stop to this intense and magnificent battle of divine lords. The great battle finally ended. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Ji Tianxing waved his hand, grabbing the dozen over godhead fragments in his palm, and put them away into his interspatial ring. Then he waved his palm and fired out a divine seal, dispelling the heaven-exterminating sword formation. Zhoush. The golden light sword formation that enveloped a radius of 10,000 miles instantly disappeared without a trace. Everyone reappeared under the night sky. The surrounding 10,000 miles had become a desert covered in yellow sand. Even further away in the dark night, the black silhouettes of undulating mountains could be faintly seen. The biting cold night wind attacked, but it did not make everyone feel cold. Instead, they became even more clear-headed and spirited. Everyone ignored their injuries and surrounded Ji Tianxing, looking at him with excitement, expressing the shock in their hearts. By God! We actually won. More than 300 divine beasts and 13 divine lord powerhouses ambushed us here and we actually won. It's more than just winning. We killed all the divine beasts and all the enemies, but we didn't die. This is a complete victory. Those were the strongest powerhouses in the He-Tian sect. From the sect leader and the 2 guardians to the 10 elders, they were all killed by us. Now there is only one deputy sect leader left in the He-Tian sect of Bloody Flame Holy Kingdom. The rest of the experts were all killed by us. The He-Tian sect is finished. Tonight's battle is simply shocking and glorious. It's enough to be recorded in the annals of history. I still can't believe that we actually did it. Mr. Tianxing is simply the reincarnation of a divine lord. Only Yun Yao and Ji Ku could remain calm, looking at him with a smile. After all, they were Ji Tianxing's wives. They had seen him create too many miracles, so they were already used to it. However, this was the first time Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest had fought a great battle after following Ji Tianxing. Tonight, not only did they broaden their horizons, they also had a deeper understanding of Ji Tianxing. Most importantly, they were even more convinced of Ji Tianxing's strength and his position as a core member. This team that was formed not long ago became more united after this battle. Ji Tianxing was more indifferent. He waved his hand to signal everyone to be quiet and said, "This is just a normal operation. You all don't have to make a fuss." In the future, when we roam the boundless heaven continent, we will often encounter such things. It'll be fine when you all get used to it. Don't be in a hurry to flatter and praise each other. Everyone has suffered serious injuries. It's better to quickly heal your injuries. Everyone obeyed him and hurriedly nodded their heads in agreement. Following that, Lin Shui took out the ship. Everyone boarded the divine ship one after another and left the barren battlefield. Chapter 3102. A mountain peak that was thousands of feet tall stood alone in the night. In the belly of the mountain, there was a cave that had been dug by man. In the dark cave, a divine warship that was 100 feet long was parked. This was Lin Shui's warship. However, its size had shrunk 100 times. Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, and the others each occupied a secret room and began to circulate their energy to heal their injuries. When they were on the way just now, everyone gathered in the meeting hall. Everyone's eyes were gathered on Yun Yao and Ji Ku. Looking at them up close, everyone could see their faces clearly and feel their unique temperaments. Immediately, everyone was even more shocked and envious, and they treated them as the perfect Jutian goddesses. Lin Shui was the first to lose it. She asked Ji Tianxing with a smile, "Young Master Tianxing, don't you plan to introduce these two beauties to everyone?" Ji Tianxing originally thought that everyone was well aware of this, so there was no need for him to do anything unnecessary. However, when Lin Shui mentioned it in front of everyone, Godlord Blood Illusion left emissary Jean, and the others also nodded happily to express their anticipation. Thus, Ji Tianxing officially introduced Yun Yao and Ji Ku to everyone. After he finished the introduction, everyone was finally sure of their identities. Moreover, everyone knew that Yun Yao was Ji Tianxing's first wife and had given birth to a son and a daughter for him. The cute fairy-like girl that had appeared in the Bloodfire Kingdom's imperial city was their daughter, Ji Wushuang. As for their son, Ji Tianxing did not mention him. Everyone did not think too much about it. They only thought that Ji Wuhan was cultivating in seclusion in some divine artifact like Wushuang. After introducing Yun Yao and Ji Ku, Ji Tianxing introduced everyone to them. In this way, the two sides got to know each other. Yun Yao was very dignified and elegant, and she was also quite magnanimous. She also expressed her welcome and gratitude that everyone could trust Ji Tianxing and follow and help Ji Tianxing. From now on, we will be friends and partners. We will share blessings and hardships together. Ji Ku also said a few simple words to greet everyone. Through this short period of time, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others could see the personalities of Yun Yao and Ji Ku. The two of them had very distinct personalities. One of them was dignified and elegant, like the bright moon in the ninth heaven. One of them was cheerful and lively, noble yet playful, like the scorching sun in the ninth heaven. All in all, Yun Yao and Ji Ku's perfect looks and bearing made everyone admire them very much. They also felt a little ashamed of their inferiority. For the next few days, the divine worship remained hidden in the cave, not revealing any of its aura. Shui Lin, Zhen Hong, and the others were all healing their wounds in the secret chamber of the divine ship. As for Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and Ji Ku, they returned to the distorted spacetime of the Jutian Tenju Tower. The time here was 50 times faster, so it was more convenient for them to recuperate in seclusion. Only 2 days had passed in the outside world, but they had been recuperating for more than 3 months. Their wounds were all healed and they had recovered to their peak state. Then Yun Yao and Ji Ku continued to cultivate and further improve their strength. Ji Tianxing took out the godhead fragments of the Hutian sect's experts and began to refine them. The god-bearing mountain range was as peaceful as ever. The ambush of the Hutian sect's experts on Ji Tianxing and the others didn't cause much of a stir. After all, this operation was top secret and only a few people knew about it. And when they were fighting fiercely in the god-bearing mountain range, no one passed by or watched. Therefore, the billions of gods in the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom didn't know that Ji Tianxing had left. They also didn't know that he had created another miracle and destroyed the 13 experts of the Hutian sect. Only the major sects in the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom vaguely sensed that something was wrong. The Hutian sect, which had always maintained a transcendent status, suddenly became unusually low-key and restrained. Not only did they suspend many of their businesses, but they also withdrew countless elites. The entire Hutian sect was not as open and confident as before. They seemed to be very cautious. The leaders of the major sects sent out scouts and secret talks to investigate the Hutian sect. However, the Hutian sect protected the news extremely strictly. Could be said that not a drop of water leaked out. Even their defensive power was several times stronger than before. Logically speaking, the major sects should be disappointed that they didn't find out any information. However, the leaders of those forces were all extremely shrewd experts. They immediately realized that something must have happened to the Hutian sect. Moreover, it was an earth-shattering matter. The more strictly the Hutian sect protected the news, the more serious the matter was. However, no one knew what had happened to the Hutian sect or what had happened to them. Gradually, two sects couldn't hold back their doubts and suspicions and began to take action. They sent out some experts and elites to deliberately create trouble to test the Hutian sect's strength. According to the usual practice, the Hutian sect would never take them seriously and would directly counterattack. However, it was very strange this time. The Hutian sect actually swallowed their anger. The two sects became more and more unscrupulous, increasing the harassment and provocation. The results still didn't change. The Hutian sect continued to endure and even withdrew their defenses. After the news spread, the major sects all understood what was going on. Something big had indeed happened to the Hutian sect. The sect's strength was empty and the experts had withered. Thus, the major sects turned into drooling beasts and began to nibble away at the Hutian sect's businesses and resources. Everyone knew that the Hutian sect was the #1 sect and had the most abundant resource reserves and wealth. If they could swallow this fat piece of meat, they could replace it and take advantage of the situation to rise. Therefore, the major sects were not willing to be outdone and did their best to snatch and divide. Of course, there was no lack of the second prince and the third prince's instructions. They had the support of the major sects behind them, so how could they let go of this excellent opportunity? At the same time, in the royal city of the Raging Flame Divine Country, in a magnificent palace, in a dimly lit secret room that was filled with divine power, a young man wearing a black robe with a golden dragon pattern was sitting in a 5-colored divine pool filled with divine liquid. He closed his eyes and circulated his energy to heal his injuries. His palms were clasped together and his eyes were closed. His whole body emitted a noble and dignified aura. This was Prince Lian. After the battle with Ji Tianxing, he was also seriously injured and unable to fight again. He knew that he had failed and that his momentum was gone. Next, the Bloodfire Divine Country would usher in a huge change in strength. Thus, he quietly left the Bloodfire Divine Country and came to the royal city of the Raging Flame Divine Country, hiding there to heal his injuries. Many years ago, he had made arrangements for the Raging Flame Divine Country and carried out a series of schemes and plans. The current Raging Flame Divine Country not only had a large number of his trusted subordinates, but there were also a few powerful forces. Compared to his hometown, the Great Yan Empire, only the Raging Flame Divine Country and the Hutian sect's headquarters could be called his base. After more than a month of seclusion, his injuries had recovered by 50%. The hideous wounds all over his body had already healed and formed scabs. At this time he was using some kind of divine art to heal his internal and bone injuries. Mobile version update website. Chapter 3103. Divine light surged in the secret room, and divine power was abundant like rain. Only Prince Lian was healing his wounds and the secret room was very quiet. But at this moment, the pitch-black door of the secret room lit up with a dazzling golden light, and let out a series of beeping sounds. Prince Lian, who was circulating his energy to heal his wounds, was immediately awakened. He knew that something big must have happened. Only the trusted guard guarding the door of the secret room would activate the array to inform him. Otherwise, no one would dare to rashly disturb him, as they would be sentenced to death. Prince Lian finished circulating his energy and waved his hand, sending out a dark green divine light that covered the stone door of the secret room. Whoosh! With a flash of green light, the array was activated, and the door of the secret room slowly opened. A tall god in golden armor with a helmet covering his face quickly walked into the secret chamber. This was a high divine lord, one of Prince Lian's trusted guards. He walked to the edge of the divine pool and stood respectfully. He bowed and reported, "This subordinate Lian Heir greets your highness." "Lian Heir, why have you disturbed this king?" Prince Lian looked at the golden-armored divine lord with a dignified gaze. His eyes were filled with anticipation, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a sinister sneer. "Is there news from the god-bearing mountain range?" The Lian Heir hurriedly nodded and replied in a sonorous voice, Your Highness is right. This subordinate was about to report this matter. Hearing this, Prince Lian let out a long sigh of relief. He leaned against the edge of the divine pool in a relaxed posture and sneered with a smug face. As expected, you didn't disappoint this king. This king used all the strength of the Blood Flame branch, a dozen divine lords, and even Longfen personally took action. Tianxing, that little B** starred. No matter how capable he was, how could he not die? No matter how cunning and treacherous he is, how can he escape from this king's calculations? Prince Lian appeared to be very pleased with himself, as if he had a card up his sleeve. After a few cold laughs, he sighed with some depression and regret. It's a pity that this king wasn't there and didn't see with my own eyes how he was blasted to pieces. It's a pity that I couldn't personally give him the final blow and send him to the Yellow Springs. The Lian heir stood respectfully, but when he heard Prince Lian's words, his expression immediately changed. His expression was very ugly, and his eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. Even his body couldn't help but tremble. But he could only stand there, not daring to interrupt Prince Lian. He could guess that Prince Lian was feeling proud of himself. How furious would he be after knowing the truth? At that time he would see Prince Lian's humiliated and embarrassed side. He would definitely become the scapegoat to vent his anger. Even if he didn't lose his life, he would probably lose a layer of skin, right? At this moment, Prince Lian's gaze fell on him. He frowned in confusion and asked, Lian heir, why are you shaking? Your Highness. The Lian heir's voice was hoarse as he replied, his body trembling even more. Prince Lian vaguely felt that something was wrong. With a gloomy expression he asked, Is there a problem? Speak. Your Highness. The Lian heir swallowed a mouthful of saliva and mustered up a great deal of courage. His voice trembled as he said, Just now this subordinate received a message from Lord Longfen. Lord Longfen said that the plan this time. Prince Lian's expression immediately changed. His entire face was as black as the bottom of a pot. His eyes narrowed fiercely, flashing with a cold light. Although he had already guessed the answer, he still bellowed in a low voice, Continue. What's the plan? The Lian heir was so frightened by Prince Lian's anger that his face turned pale and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. But he still forced himself to hold on. With a heart that was unafraid of death, he continued. Lord Longfen said that they successfully ambushed Tianxing and his companions. But after fighting for an hour they still failed in the end. Not only were all the elders and protectors killed by the enemy, even he himself. I'm afraid that it would be difficult for him to survive. The Lian heir used all his strength to finish speaking. Then he lowered his head as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He closed his eyes and waited for death. The secret chamber was dead silent. Not a single sound could be heard. The expected rage and roar did not come. The Lian heir quietly raised his head and saw that Prince Lian was stunned. His body was stiff as he sat in the deity's pool. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He was so angry that it was twisted and the veins on his forehead were bulging. His eyes were fixed on the surface of the water and he did not move for a long time. It's over. The Lian heir was filled with despair and mourned silently in his heart. He knew very well that this news was a huge blow to Prince Lian. As expected, after a long time Prince Lian came back to his senses. His eyes were bloodshot with anger as he roared in a hoarse voice. Why? Why did it fail? How could it have failed? What were those monarchs doing? Was Longfen's 9th degree realm strength fake? So many monarchs, and they even set up an ambush in advance. How could they not kill a beast of a foreign race? Was he really that powerful? Was he sent by Haotian to be my enemy? Grand Prince Lian was so angry that he was about to go crazy. He erupted like a volcano. He clenched his fists so tightly that they creaked. He roared at the top of his lungs. Instantly the entire secret chamber shook violently. The deity's lake that was 10 feet wide also splashed with colorful waves. Countless drops of deity's lake evaporated into a thick mist. Prince Lian's anger caused the entire deity's lake to boil. The Lian heir was scared out of his wits. He hurriedly knelt and kowtowed. With a sobbing voice he advised, Your Highness, please calm down. This is just a temporary loss. We will definitely take revenge. You are still injured. Please calm down. Prince Lian suddenly turned his head and glared at the Lian heir with bloodshot eyes. He was unable to restrain his anger and punched out. Scram. You bastard, do you really want to see me make a fool of myself? With a muffled bang, the Lien heir was sent flying by the punch. Blood spurted out of his 7 orifices as he flew back dozens of feet. He smashed into the door of the secret chamber and rolled on the ground far away. However, after he stopped, he did not bother to check on his injuries. He hurriedly knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Prince Lien. "Thank you for sparing my life, Your Highness. I'm so grateful." Prince Lien remained silent. He waved his hand and sent out a ray of divine light to close the door of the secret chamber. Bang! Only then did the Lien heir crawl up with lingering fear. He sat cross-legged on the ground and began to heal his injuries. The secret chamber fell into silence. Prince Lien sat in the deity's lake like a stone statue. He gradually calmed down. He frowned and pondered. His eyes flashed with a cold light and murderous intent. After a few minutes, he finally closed his eyes and ended his contemplation. Longfin's operation failed. The Blood Flame Divine Kingdom's branch is considered destroyed. However, that bastard managed to escape this disaster. This means that his strength has increased again. Moreover, the lackeys that followed him were definitely capable as well. I cannot underestimate or be careless. I must give it my all. Furthermore, he had to kill him before he entered the Great Yen Empire. Otherwise, once he enters the Great Yen Empire, he will definitely cause a huge commotion. Chapter 3104. Outside the secret chamber was a dimly lit passageway. The Lien heir sat cross-legged on the ground, silently channeling to heal his injuries. At this moment, the sound of light footsteps could be heard, approaching from afar. The Lien heir immediately stopped channeling, opened his eyes and turned to look. He saw a tall and burly figure in purple robes walking over from not far away. It was a middle-aged god who was as strong as a bear and was 20 feet tall. He wore an exquisite purple robe embroidered with golden patterns and dragon and elephant patterns. There was also a special emblem on his chest. This person's skin was purplish-black and his head was huge and hairless. His shiny scalp shone with a purple light in the darkness and his bell-sized eyes shone with a cold light. He had a wide face and nose and a flat and wide mouth. His aura was very strong and he exuded a dignified aura. But at this moment he was furious and his cheeks were contorted in anger, accompanied by surging killing intent. Seeing that the purple-robed Baldy had arrived, the Lien heir immediately stood up and bowed respectfully. Lien heir greets Sect Master Purple G. Although the Lien heir was one of Prince Lien's trusted guards, he was honored to have his original surname abolished and was given the surname Lien by Prince Lien. He was ranked second in terms of strength and status. This was a great honor. However, compared to this purple-robed Baldy, the Lien heir's status was still too low. Because this big Baldy was the sect master of the Raging Flames Divine Country. In the Raging Flames Divine Country, there were also 7 top sections. The Heavenly Union sect was also fully deserving of being the #1 faction with a transcendent status. The sect master Purple G glanced at the Lien heir and walked to the door of the secret chamber. He said solemnly, "I request to see the prince." The Lien heir nodded to show that he understood and said respectfully, "Please wait a moment, Lord Purple G. The prince is in a fit of anger, please wait a moment." He had just been sent flying by Prince Lien and was afraid that the prince's anger had not subsided. If he went to touch the prince's head at this time and got punched again, he might not be able to keep his life. However, Sect Master Purple Extreme was very impatient. With a black face he said in a deep voice, "Don't waste time. I have an extremely important matter." The Lien heir was very helpless and could only brace himself to step forward and report. "Reporting to Your Highness, Sect Master ZG requests an audience." Prince Lien's voice came from the secret chamber. "Let him in." Then the door of the secret chamber slowly opened. Lien heir glanced over and saw Grand Prince Lien sitting in the deity's lake. His expression had returned to normal. Only then did he feel much more at ease. Sect Master ZG strode into the chamber and walked straight to the deity's pool, bowing to Grand Prince Lien. "Greetings, Your Highness." Grand Prince Lien waved his hand and shot out a divine light to close the door of the secret room. He stared at Sect Master ZG with a dignified gaze, asking in a low voice, "You've already received the news?" Sect Master ZG nodded and said with a sorrowful and indignant expression, "Long Fun is my junior brother and my only friend. No matter what methods that bastard Tianxing used, no matter how strong he was still able to defeat him. Since he killed Long Fen, he is my mortal enemy. I will personally lead the experts of my sect and charge into the God-bearing mountain range to tear that bastard into pieces. Sect Master Ziji's emotions were very agitated and his tone was indignant. His entire body was filled with killing intent that soared to the heavens. Grand Prince Lien frowned and said calmly, "Ziji, of course I know that you and Long Fen are as close as brothers. It's normal for you to want to avenge Long Fen. However, Long Fen and the 12 divine lords under him were all killed by Tianxing. It can be seen that the brat's strength far exceeds our expectations. He must have some unknown methods and secrets. Even if you lead the protectors and elders to kill him, you might not be able to defeat him, let alone kill him." Sect Master Ziji said firmly, "I believe that although that brat killed Long Fen, it was definitely not an easy victory. He must be severely injured as well. The God-bearing mountain range is extremely dangerous. That brat definitely won't dare to continue traversing and will most likely hide in the God-bearing mountain range to recuperate. At this time, if I lead the experts of my sect to find him, he will definitely die." Grand Prince Lien nodded slightly and said, "That's right. Your analysis is very reasonable. However, the God-bearing mountain range is vast and that brat is extremely cautious and cunning. Where are you going to find him? If you split up and search and he catches the opportunity, you might be defeated one by one. Have you considered these problems?" This. Sect Master Ziji was speechless and revealed an awkward expression. He had just received the news of Long Fen's death and was furious and sorrowful. He hurriedly rushed to see Grand Prince Lien. How could he have the time to consider so much? Grand Prince Lien continued, "Ziji, I can understand your feelings. How could I not want to grind his bones and scatter his ashes? However, we have already failed twice. We should learn from our experience and not act rashly again. Otherwise, not only will we not achieve our goal, we will also become more and more passive." Sect Master Ziji pursed his lips and said with a nod, "Your Highness is right. This subordinate indeed lacked consideration. I believe your Highness already has a countermeasure. This subordinate is willing to hear the details." Grand Prince Lien's expression was solemn as he said in a solemn tone, "The God-bearing mountain range is vast and dangerous. It is not suitable to be a battlefield. Only the raging flame divine kingdom under our control and surveillance is an excellent battlefield and also his burial ground. This time I will gather all my strength and weave an inescapable net, condense a god-slaying sword and give him a fatal blow. Once we strike, we can only succeed. Failure is not allowed." Sect Master Ziji was infected by his powerful aura and his eyes lit up. He nodded heavily and said, "Your Highness is far-sighted. We will definitely succeed in one strike." Grand Prince Lien waved his hand and instructed, "You may leave. Wait for my orders in peace." Sect Master Ziji acknowledged the order and asked again, "Your Highness, are you really not planning to send people to the periphery of the God-bearing mountain range to intercept and kill that brat? What if we meet him while waiting for him and he is seriously injured?" Grand Prince Lien sneered, "This chance is very slim. He's not that stupid. However, I will arrange for people from Sacred Fire Sect and Surging Wave Palace to ambush at the periphery of the God-bearing mountain range. If there is a chance to kill him, that would be for the best. Even if there is no chance to kill him, we can still monitor his movements and traces." Sect Master Ziji breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly cupped his hands and bowed. "Your Highness is indeed wise. You have long grasped the overall situation and are far-sighted." After a few words of flattery, Sect Master Ziji bowed and left the secret chamber. Only Grand Prince Lien was left in the secret chamber. Silence was restored. He took out several transmission jade slips and entered several orders into them, sending them to different people. Whoosh, whoosh whoosh. The jade slips transformed into several rays of light and quickly disappeared. Grand Prince Lien murmured expressionlessly, "It is fine if I don't attack, but once I do I can only use my full strength. I hope that the raging flame divine kingdom will be his burial ground. We must not let him cross the raging flame divine kingdom and enter the great Yen Empire." Chapter 3105. Unknowingly, half a month passed. After 15 days of circulating energy and healing Lin Shui Zhenhong, and the rest's injuries were basically no longer a problem. Everyone finished healing and headed to the divine ship's meeting hall to gather. Yun Yao and Jiku were still in the distorted spacetime of the divine pagoda, silently cultivating in seclusion. With incomparably rich resources and the replenishment of the blood flame sacred tree's power, their strength improved very quickly. Half a month had passed in the outside world, but they had already cultivated in the distorted spacetime for 2 years. It was the same for Ji Tianxing. In these 2 years he had completely refined the godhead fragments of more than 10 heavenly sect experts. Not only had he absorbed a massive amount of divine power, he had also refined 29 types of divine Dao laws. These 29 types of laws were basically divine Dao laws that only divine lords could cultivate. More than half of them came from Long Fun. The divine Dao laws that the other 12 divine lords had mastered were mostly of lower grades, and their effects and power were not too outstanding. Only the divine Dao laws that Long Fun had mastered were of a higher grade, and their power and effects were extraordinary. This greatly benefited Ji Tianxing, and his harvest was rather bountiful. Currently, the number of divine Dao laws that he had mastered had reached more than 280. This was an extremely terrifying number. Throughout the entire Great Yan Empire, there was no expert who could master so many divine Dao laws. In fact, those with more than 200 types of laws were as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. In Ji Tianxing's memory in the divine world 1,000 years ago, generally only divine king experts would master more than 200 types of divine Dao laws. In this era, even if the overall standard was higher than back then, there would not be too much of a difference. 280 types of laws is almost comparable to a first or second level divine king expert. My current combat strength has increased by about 3 times compared to before. It's a pity that I didn't take advantage of the opportunity to break through to the 7th stage and become a high-ranking divine lord. Otherwise, I should be invincible below the divine king level. Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation and muttered to himself, feeling somewhat regretful. But he also understood that his strength was too terrifying, and it was harder for him to break through compared to other divine lords. If he did not have too great of an opportunity, it would probably be very difficult for him to step into the 7th stage and become a high-ranking divine lord. He calculated the time and everyone's injuries should have recovered, so he left the distorted space-time. Shua. With a flash of light, Ji Tianxing returned to the secret chamber. He put away the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and left the secret room, heading to the meeting hall alone. Yun Yao and Ji Ku were still at a critical juncture of their cultivation, so it was not appropriate for them to come out for the time being. When Ji Tianxing arrived at the meeting hall, Xuelin, Zhenhong, and Xuehuan were already waiting for him. When he stepped into the hall, everyone's eyes gathered on him, carefully sizing him up. Ji Tianxing stood in the middle of the hall. Seeing everyone staring at him, he couldn't help but touch his cheeks and straighten his clothes. Is there a flower on my face? Or did he wear the wrong clothes? Why are you all staring at me like that? Everyone chuckled when they heard this teasing. Xuelin stared at him with burning eyes and asked curiously, "Kid, why do I feel that your strength has increased a lot?" Zhenhong also nodded and said in agreement, "Young master's strength and aura are unfathomable and unpredictable. After recuperating in seclusion this time, your strength has become as vast as the sky and as vast as the stars." Left emissary Jean smiled and said jokingly, "Young master, don't tell me you broke through another cultivation level? If you break through 1 cultivation level every month, you will become a divine king when we enter the Great Yan Empire. By then you will be able to dominate the entire Great Yan Empire and sit firmly on the throne." In the outside world, such words were taboo and could even be punished for a serious crime. Left emissary Jean would never speak carelessly under normal circumstances. However, this was Xuelin's divine battleship, and they were all friends who had gone through life and death battles together. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a smile, "Break through 1 cultivation level every month? How can it be so exaggerated? If such a monster really appeared, he would definitely become the public enemy of the entire world. As for the throne of the Great Yan Empire, already becoming a divine king powerhouse, who would still set their sights on a mere throne. You should set your sights on the entire Tianbei region and become the region lord who rules over thousands of gods. You should even dominate the entire boundless heaven continent and become the overlord who rules over the entire continent." The meeting hall fell silent instantly. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at Ji Tianxing dumbfoundedly, as if they were petrified. Obviously, to Ji Tianxing this joke was nothing out of the ordinary. But to the crowd, it was an unimaginable and shocking heroic statement. What Tianbei region lord? What boundless heaven continent overlord? These were all levels that no one dared to come into contact with and simply did not dare to imagine. The entire Great Yen Empire was already vast enough for everyone. To be able to become the emperor of the Great Yen Empire was already a great figure. After a long time, everyone came back to their senses and gasped, exclaiming and lamenting. "Oh my God! You really dared to say that. Aren't you afraid of great heaven's punishment?" Xuelin looked at him in amazement and could not help but pat him on the shoulder. "Young master is really the world's #1 madman. We can't even look up to you." Sir God Blood Illusion could not help applauding and praising. Left Emissary Jean and Right Emissary Blood Dragon even raised their thumbs, revealing expressions of deep admiration. When can we be like young master and have the courage to say such bold words? Even if we die we will have no regrets. Seeing that everyone was so emotional, Ji Tianqing sighed silently. Sigh. If you don't even have this bit of insight and courage, how far can you follow me in the future? Only Zhenhong did not speak. Although she was also so excited that her pretty face was flushed red and her blood was boiling from the shock. However, she looked at Ji Tianqing with a heart full of admiration and strong expectations in her heart. She said in a firm tone, "I believe that with young master's talent, you will be able to realize these bold words very soon. If I can follow young master and see the scenery of Tianbei region and the boundless heaven continent, it will be the luckiest thing in my life." Hearing these words and seeing her look like a fanatical fan, Xuelin could not help but hold her forehead and sigh. Sigh. This girl is really hopelessly infatuated. Ji Tianqing raised his hand and motioned for everyone to be quiet. He said, "All right, everyone's injuries have more or less recovered. Let's set off." Left Emissary Jean and Right Emissary Blood Dragon acknowledged the order and hurriedly left the hall to operate the divine ship. But Xuelin, Zhenhong, Blood Illusion and the rest were not in a hurry to leave. They all surrounded Ji Tianqing and asked what was going on with Tianbei region and the boundless heaven continent. "Kid, you're not from the Great Yen Empire, right? Are you from Tianbei region?" "Young master, can you tell us about the situation of Tianbei region and the boundless heaven continent?" "Young master, to us, a divine king is the most unattainable powerhouse and important figure. But you don't seem to have much reaction to a divine king. Could it be that you have seen a divine king powerhouse?" Chapter 3106. Lin Shuer and Zhenhong trio's words made Ji Tianqing somewhat at a loss whether to laugh or cry. However, thinking about it, he felt relieved. Zhenhong and God Lord Blood Illusion's range of activity was limited to the periphery of the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom and had never left the Great Yen Empire. Lin Shuer was considered experienced and knowledgeable, but she only came to the Great Yen Empire from the Celestial Fei Empire and did not understand Tianbei region's situation. Of course, Ji Tianqing did not understand Tianbei region and boundless heaven continent's situation either. But he had been investigating this matter all along and collecting relevant information. Regarding Tianbei region and boundless heaven continent setup, he still had some basic understanding. Since he had nothing to do, he explained to everyone. Tianbei region is located at the northernmost tip of the continent. Further north is the Sunset Sea region. That is the Sea Clan's territory. Tianbei region doesn't sound big, but in reality, it accommodates more than a dozen empires. Under the dozen empires, there are hundreds of divine kingdoms ruled, with trillions of divine spirits. According to my knowledge and memory, there are roughly only a scant few divine kings in a region. Normally there are no more than 10. Furthermore, they are all low-ranked divine kings. Middle-ranked divine kings are abnormally rare. Lin Shuai nodded to indicate that she understood and said, "So we live in Tianbei region. Among the hundreds of divine kingdoms, there are only a few divine kings. No wonder we have never seen a divine king before. The Great Yen Empire also hasn't appeared for 1,000 years. Hearing you say so, Tianbei region is indeed very vast, beyond our imagination." Ji Tianqing said with a slight smile, "Tianbei region is very vast. But compared to the entire boundless heaven continent, it's nothing. After all, there are close to 100 regions on the entire continent. Each region's area and population are no less than Tianbei region. Looking at the entire boundless heaven continent, divine king powerhouses are also less than 1,000. I vaguely remember that 1,000 years ago, there seemed to be only 600 over divine kings. But now there's no way to know how many divine kings there are. Among those few hundred divine kings, 70% are low-rank divine kings, 25% are middle-rank divine kings. As for high-rank divine kings at most, it's also only 5%. Lin Shui and Godlord Blood Illusion both revealed a look of amazement, very shocked and emotional. Zhenhong was rather excited and agitated and could not resist asking, "Sir, how do you know so clearly? Could it be that you're a divine king's descendant? Or perhaps you come from a god king clan?" Ji Tianxing thought for a while and replied without changing his expression, "Neither. I just like million small." He said that he had studied many ancient books to find this information. Oh, Masahiro nodded to indicate that he understood. She still wanted to pursue a few more questions. Lin Shui hurriedly rushed to ask, "Tianxing, hearing what you said earlier, are there only divine king powerhouses on the boundless heaven continent? Then why was the overlord of the continent called the Azura God Emperor by the statues erected in the city squares? Was God Emperor a kind of honorable title, or was it an even more profound realm of the divine Tao? Is there an even stronger realm above divine king?" When the words Shura God Emperor were mentioned, Ji Tianxing's body stiffened, and an imperceptible cold light flashed in his eyes. However, he remained calm and collected as he shook his head and said, "This question of yours has stumped me. This is also the secret that I have been pursuing and investigating all this time." Lin Shui frowned and thought for a while. She vaguely understood something. Zhenhong asked again, full of doubts, "Sir, I have also thought before, what kind of world are we living in? Is there only the boundless heaven continent in this world? What is outside the continent? The mysterious and vast heavenly sea?" Ji Tianxing looked at her with a smile and said in a serious tone, "The questions that you have raised are also secrets that I am eager to know. By the way, did you often daydream in the past? Would you let your imagination run wild and fantasize about many illusory things?" Zhenhong was stunned for a moment and nodded somewhat awkwardly. Lin Shui hurriedly teased, "This little girl indeed likes to daydream. However, what she is thinking about is not illusory but the person in front of her." Zhenhong's thoughts were exposed in public. Immediately her pretty face turned red from neck to neck. She was so embarrassed that she could not control herself. Sir God Blood Illusion's expression did not change. He pretended that he did not understand anything and obediently played the part of the wooden background. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said to Lin Shui with a serious expression, "When we cultivate the divine path, it is the process of understanding heaven and earth, the universe and the rules of great Tao. The most precious quality is to meditate calmly and allow one's thoughts to wander. Think about the origin of heaven and earth, the origin of the universe and the rules of great Tao. Only gods who constantly think and explore diligently can aspire to the peak of the divine path. Therefore don't tease Zhenhong. Perhaps in the future her divine path will far surpass yours." Lin Shui was lectured by him. She frowned in annoyance. However, Ji Tianxing's words were profound and very reasonable. She could not refute him. Zhenhong and Sir God Blood Illusion were deep in thought. They nodded in admiration to express their agreement. Lin Shui was not convinced, but she could not do anything to Ji Tianxing. She could only change the topic. "Kid, why did you go to the Great Yan Empire to die for no reason? Was it because of this matter?" "What matter?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked despite knowing the answer. Lin Shui frowned and said, "What did you say just now? What is the place beyond the boundless heaven continent? What is the realm above the divine king? Did you go to the Great Yan Empire to investigate these secrets?" Ji Tianxing nodded without hesitation and said, "That's right." Lin Shui was shocked and looked at him in disbelief. She exclaimed, Are you crazy? You went to the Great Yan Empire to die just to investigate these illusory things that have nothing to do with us?" Sir God Blood Illusion was also shocked. His eyes and expression were complicated. He respected Ji Tianxing and was willing to believe and follow him. However, he still could not understand Ji Tianxing's actions. Only Zhenhong did not speak. His expression did not change much. It was as though in her heart, everything Ji Tianxing did was right. There was no need to ask for the reason. Ji Tianxing looked at Lin Shui and said seriously, "I'm not crazy. I'm more clear-headed than anyone else. First of all, the things I want to investigate are not illusory. These information and secrets are important to me. You might not understand, but I have my own secrets. Forgive me for not being able to tell you now. Secondly, I've only offended Prince Lian. I'm not trying to assassinate Great Yan's emperor. How is that suicide? Moreover, even if I really wanted to assassinate Great Yan's emperor, it's a sure thing. How is that suicide? Lin Shui, Sect Master Lin, this is my decision. I can't change it. If you think it's dangerous and don't want to die with me, I'll leave now. We'll go our separate ways. Don't worry, I won't force anyone to take the risk with me. Sir God Blood Illusion saw Ji Tianxing's serious expression and tone. He hastily tried to smooth things over and explained, Young master, please calm down. Sect Master didn't mean that. You've misunderstood her. If you want to talk about sword piercing the 9 heavens with more like-minded people, follow excellent reading literature on WeChat. Talk about life, find confidant. Chapter 3107. Ji Tianxing ignored Godlord Blood Illusion's explanation and turned to leave. After a short while he entered the secret chamber and meditated. Zhen Hong was a little worried and quickly went to comfort him. Only Lin Shui and Godlord Blood Illusion were left in the hall. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Lin Shui stomped her feet in anger and frowned. Humph. Damn brat. Why is he so arrogant and stubborn? What kind of person do you take me for? Do I look like someone who is afraid of death? I'm just worried about you. I'm afraid it'll be dangerous for you to go to the Great Fire Empire. You're taking my good intentions for granted. Lin Shui roared angrily. Godlord Blood Illusion quickly comforted her and asked her not to be angry. Unfortunately, Lin Shui did not listen and ignored his comforting words. She turned and went into the secret chamber and did not come out. Godlord Blood Illusion stood alone in the hall and could only smile bitterly. He had nothing to do, so he went to the control room of the divine vessel to chat with Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon Right Emissary. Unexpectedly, the two of them were not focused on piloting the divine vessel and were even gossiping about what was going on. Godlord Blood Illusion then understood that the two of them had also heard the argument in the hall, but they could not hear it clearly. Seeing that the two of them were very interested and kept asking questions, Godlord Blood Illusion reprimanded them angrily. Focus on piloting the divine vessel. Why are you meddling in other people's business? Young Master Tianxing and our sect master are just bickering. Don't get involved blindly. If you really anger the two of you, who can bear it? Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon Right Emissary shrank their necks and kept quiet. The southern part of the God-bearing mountain range was close to the border of the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom. Normally, there would be a large army stationed at the border of a divine kingdom or soldiers patrolling. However, this area was deserted. That was because the God-bearing mountain range was between 2 divine kingdoms and was the best natural barrier. Ordinary people could not cross the God-bearing mountain range and enter the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom. If someone really crossed the mountain range and entered the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom, they were experts that ordinary soldiers could not afford to offend. It would be useless to station or patrol. The Raging Flames Divine Kingdom had always done that and did not send a large army to guard the border. In the past 10,000 years, there had indeed not been any accidents. But today, from the moment the sun rose, a large number of gods appeared at the southern edge of the God-bearing mountain range. At least 3,000 experts of the god race, dressed in 2 completely different uniforms, had arrived at the border. These experts were arrayed along the border with 1 person stationed every 100 li, hiding in the forest or grassland. A total of over 3,000 people actually formed a defensive line that was over 300,000 miles long. The Protoss in fiery red armor and long robes were distributed in the eastern part of the defense line. As for the Protoss in ice blue armor or blue robes, they were hiding in the western part of the defensive line. Almost every expert had a special symbol embroidered on their sleeves and lapels, representing the forces they belonged to. More than 3,000 experts came from 2 major forces. One had the dark red symbol of rising flames, and the other had the azure symbol of surging waves. If there were any experts from the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom present, they would be able to recognize that these 3,000 experts were from the Sacred Fire Sect and the Surging Waves Palace. All of them were well trained, displaying a firm will and rich experience in concealment. Within a short 2 hours, more than 3,000 experts had all hidden themselves. No matter if they were hiding underground, in the forest or on the grassland, no one could see through them. At a glance, the border was as calm as ever. To the north was the majestic God-bearing mountain range and dark green forests. and to the south was the vast grassland and land. At this moment, in a dark green forest on the western defensive line, a middle-aged god clan member dressed in purple robes was hiding in a towering ancient tree. He was meditating with his eyes closed. The tree hole inside the ancient tree was very wide, enough to accommodate 10 people. 4 middle-aged divine lords in fiery red armor were standing in a row, respectfully standing in a row. Sect Master, our sect's disciples are all in position. The concealment is complete. Someone cupped his hands and reported the situation. The middle-aged divine lord called Sect Master was the current sect master of the Sacred Fire sect, Xingwin. His eyes were still closed and he said expressionlessly, "Good, hold the defensive line. Once the target appears, do not act rashly. Immediately report back." "Yes, Sect Master." The middle-aged divine lord who reported the news replied. Another middle-aged divine lord asked in confusion, "Sect Master, we are following the young prince's orders to hide here and wait for Tianqing to appear. Are we really not going to do anything?" Xing Wuyin said calmly, "We only need to follow the young prince's orders." The middle-aged divine lord with a mustache frowned and advised in a low voice, "Sect Master, we naturally have to follow the young prince's orders. But we can't be so inflexible and only know how to follow orders. If we don't know how to be flexible, we will always be a second-rate sect. Look at the Surging Wave Palace. They used to be a second-rate sect like us. But they are good at reading the young prince's mind, so they always exceed the quota and won the young prince's appreciation. Over the past decade, the Surging Wave Palace has received many benefits and been promoted by the young prince. As a result, the Surging Wave Palace has now become a first-rate sect and one of the 7 major sections. The Surging Wave Palace was ranked last among the 7 major sects of the Raging Flame Divine Country. But it was still a first-rate sect and had a higher status. The Sacred Fire sect was different. They were the best among the second-rate sects and their power and status were second only to the Surging Wave Palace. But the Sacred Fire sect was still a second-rate sect and had been left in the dust by the Surging Wave Palace. Over the past few years, the people of the Surging Wave Palace had been very arrogant. Even when they met the disciples of the Sacred Fire sect, they would still be arrogant and haughty. Xing Wuyin opened his eyes and glanced at the 4 divine lords. He asked, "Is that what all of you think?" The 4 middle-aged divine lords nodded in unison, feeling indignant at the injustice. "Sect Master, you can't keep a low profile anymore. You have to do something big and make a great contribution. Over the past decade, the Surging Wave Palace's status has risen and they are riding on our heads. Our disciples have a lot of complaints. In the past, we were on equal footing with the Surging Wave Palace. But now we are being bullied. Who can be convinced? Sect Master, I heard that the young prince hates Tianqing to the core and sees him as his mortal enemy. If we can kill Tianqing, it will be a great contribution. We will definitely surpass the Surging Wave Palace in one fell swoop." Xing Wuyin frowned and said in a deep voice, "Even Long Fen was killed by that brat. What qualifications do we have to deal with him?" The middle-aged divine lord with a handlebar mustache hurriedly explained, "Sect Master, we are not fighting him head-on. We are just taking advantage of him. Everyone knows that that brat fought with the Bloody Flame Divine Country's Heavenly Union sect before. Although he won and even killed Long Fen and over a dozen divine lords, he is not a god king. However, he was not a divine king powerhouse. If he killed 1,000 enemies, he would definitely suffer 800 casualties and he would also be heavily injured. We have the advantage in numbers. As long as we can surround him, we will definitely be able to kill him. Taking a step back, even if we can't kill him, being able to capture him and send him to the young prince is also a great contribution." Chapter 3108. After listening to the 4 Sir God's advice, Xing Wuyin frowned and pondered for a long time. He had seen the changes in the status of the Sacred Fire sect and the Surging Waves Palace all these years. He was also jealous of the Surging Waves Palace's trickery and despised the palace master's glib words in front of the young prince. However, it was an indisputable fact that the Surging Waves Palace was stronger and stronger than the Sacred Fire sect in all aspects. He had thought countless times about how to please the young prince and get more resources and benefits for the Sacred Fire sect. Unfortunately, the situation in the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom was very peaceful and he had never found an opportunity. Now the opportunity had finally come. There was a monster called Tianqing in the neighboring country. Not only did he kill all the experts of the heavenly sect, but he also made the young prince suffer a great loss and became the young prince's mortal enemy. Xing Wuyin also knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. As long as he could kill Tianqing or trap him, it would be a great merit. After solving the young prince's problem, the Sacred Fire sect would soar and surpass the Surging Waves Palace would only be a matter of time. He almost wanted to nod and agree to this at the first moment. However, he had always been cautious. Even if the benefits were at stake, he had to consider the consequences. Tianqing could make the young prince suffer a great loss and kill all the experts of the heavenly sect. One could imagine how powerful he was. An expert of this level was still very scary even if he was seriously injured. He was afraid that the experts of the Sacred Fire sect would not only fail to capture Tianqing but also suffer heavy casualties. In that case, the Sacred Fire sect would be finished. The four Sir Gods saw that Xing Wuyin was silent and were secretly anxious. They could not help but persuade him again. Sect Master, we know you have concerns and are worried about everyone's safety. However, as the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. If you don't take the risk, how can you ask for wealth? That's right. We have been idle all these years. We have skills but nowhere to use them. Now that we finally have an opportunity, if we don't take it, we will regret it for the rest of our lives. The people of the Surging Waves Palace can think of what we can think of. Sect Master, hurry up and make a decision. If the Surging Waves Palace snatches away our only chance to make a contribution, our Sacred Fire sect will never be able to stand out. Sect Leader, this is not only the wish of us four elders, but also the wish of many disciples. The four elders tried to persuade him one after another. It was indeed a bit noisy. Xing Wuyin was a little upset. He was still hesitating at first, but he immediately made up his mind. Shut up. He coldly shouted with a dignified tone. The four elders immediately fell silent and looked at him nervously. Xing Wuyin raised his head and looked at the four people with a dignified expression. He said in a low voice, "Pass down the order, tell everyone to be on guard. Once you find traces of that brat, immediately send out a signal to surround and intercept him. As long as you succeed in stopping that brat, I will reward you according to your merits. If you can capture that brat alive, I will reward you handsomely." Hearing these words, the four elders were all overjoyed and they all revealed smiles on their faces. Sect Leader is wise. This subordinate obeys. I'll pass on the order right away. Sect Master, there's hope for the rise of our Sacred Fire sect. Three of them were overjoyed and hurriedly turned to pass on the message. Only the middle-aged Sir God with the handlebar mustache pondered for a moment before saying, "Everyone wait." He stopped the three elders who were about to leave and said to Xing Wuyin, "Sect Leader, since you have decided to seize this opportunity, we can't just wait for him to come. We should take the initiative to attack and explore the inner parts of the God-bearing mountain range to find traces of that brat. Only then can we seize the initiative. Otherwise, when we find that brat, the people from the Palace of Surging Waves will also interfere. What should we do then? If we really want to snatch the credit, I'm afraid we can't win against the Palace of Surging Waves." Hearing his words, the three elders were stunned for a moment before they turned to look at Xing Wuyin. Obviously, they also felt that it made sense and hoped that Xing Wuyin would make a decision. Xing Wuyin frowned. He thought to himself that since he had to give it his all, he might as well give it his all. Alright. Then pass down the order. Each deacon will lead 50 disciples and form a team. A total of 30 teams will advance towards the God-bearing mountain range at the same time. Each team will be separated by 500 miles. If there is any situation, we can look after each other. Xing Wuyin adjusted the deployment and the four elders hurriedly passed down the order. In a short while, more than 1,500 Sacred Fire sect disciples were divided into 30 teams and quietly entered the God-bearing mountain range. Everyone was excited and vigilant as they searched the surroundings, ready to charge at any time. As for Xing Wuyin and the four elders, they flew through the sky in stealth mode and monitored the movements within a radius of 20,000 miles. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The people of the Sacred Fire sect had left the border and entered the God-bearing mountain range for more than 10,000 miles. At the same time, at the border of the God-bearing mountain range, the disciples of the Palace of Surging Waves were still hiding in the forest, grassland, and underground. In a certain cave, a dark divine light was shining. A middle-aged woman with a thin face and dark blue skin, wearing an ice blue dress, was sitting on an ice lotus platform with her eyes closed. 7 middle-aged god race people wearing ice blue armor were standing in the cave, their gazes focused on the middle-aged woman. Someone bowed and respectfully reported, "Palace Lord, things are as you expected. The people of the Sacred Fire sect did not guard the border and have entered the god-burying mountain range." Another burly man said in a loud voice, "Palace Lord, the Sacred Fire sect has been suppressed by us all these years. They have been looking for a chance to gain merit and gain the favor of the young prince. This is indeed the best opportunity to intercept Tianxing from the neighboring country. Is our sect really going to wait and see the Sacred Fire sect steal the credit?" A handsome youth with a cold face and a cold temperament also advised, "Palace Lord, we have surpassed the Sacred Fire sect in all aspects. We cannot fall behind them in this matter and cannot give them a chance to turn the tables. I am willing to lead 300 disciples into the god-burying mountain range and actively search for Tianxing's whereabouts." The other elders also echoed and asked for the sect master's permission. "Palace Lord, I am also willing to lead the elite disciples to search for Tianxing's whereabouts. Palace Lord, I am also willing to go." Hearing the elder's words, the Palace Lord of Surging Waves still had her eyes closed and appeared unusually calm. After the noisy crowd gradually quieted down, she said slowly, "The more anxious we are, the easier it is to make mistakes. We have already become one of the 7 major sects and are above the Sacred Fire sect. Why should we compete with them? Wouldn't that lower our status? Moreover, if that monstrous youth called Tianxing was so easy to deal with, how could he become the young prince's nemesis?" Hearing those words, the 7 elders all grew silent. The Palace Lord of Surging Waves continued, "The Sacred Fire sect is in such a hurry. Let them be the vanguard first." Chapter 3109. The night was so dark that one couldn't even see their fingers. There was no starlight in the sky either. The pitch-black divine ship was like a black shadow cutting through the night sky as it sped through the god-burying mountain range. Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon Right Emissary were focused on operating the divine ship. Looking at the dark sky ahead, Left Emissary Jean couldn't help but sigh. "We'll be out of the god-burying mountain range and enter the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom 50,000 miles south. I've never left the Bloody Flames Divine Kingdom in my life, so I don't know what the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom looks like. What's the difference between it and our Bloody Flames Divine Kingdom?" Blood Dragon Right Emissary chuckled. "They're all divine kingdoms under the rule of the Great Yen Empire. What's the difference? It's just a little more prosperous with more people and powerhouses." "That's true." Left Emissary Jean nodded and said with some emotion, "I've been traveling in the god-burying mountain range for the past few days, and I've seen what a forbidden area is. We're attacked by divine beasts several times a day, and they're all at the Divine Lord realm. They move in groups. Fortunately, we're on a divine ship and there are many powerhouses traveling with us. If we pass through this mountain range alone, we'll die 9 times out of 10. Blood Dragon Right Emissary smiled again and nodded. "So without the protection of powerhouses, even a divine lord can't move an inch. It's impossible to travel all over the Great Yen Empire. Only powerhouses like the Sect Master and Young Master Tianxing can leave the Great Yen Empire and travel all over the Northern Heaven region." The two were chatting and sighing in their hearts. At this moment, Left Emissary Jean suddenly frowned and said in a low voice, "Slow down. There seems to be a lot of divine beasts moving about 2,500 miles ahead." Blood Dragon Right Emissary was also vigilant. After releasing his divine sense to investigate, he said with a solemn expression, "Yes. I've detected 9 groups of divine beasts, close to 300 people. They seem to be searching for something." Left Emissary Jean said without hesitation, "Slow down and stay hidden. I'll inform the Sect Master and Young Master Tianxing." Blood Dragon Right Emissary frowned and chuckled. "Don't be nervous. I've already investigated. Those people aren't much of a threat. 80% of them are divine lords and only a dozen or so divine lords, and they're all low-ranked divine lords. Even if they want to harm us, they can't even break through the defenses of the divine warship. They're not even as good as those blood-winged divine birds we encountered before." Left Emissary Jean nodded slightly. "All right, then let's not inform Sect Leader and Young Master Tianxing first. This place is close to the border of the Raging Flame Divine Country. We have to be vigilant." After the two of them came to an agreement, they cautiously piloted the divine warship and flew through the night sky. The distance between the two sides was constantly shrinking. 4,000 kilometers, 3,000 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers. Finally, when the distance between the two sides was only 1,000 kilometers. The 9 groups of gods seemed to have discovered the invisible divine worship, and they all gathered around it. They activated their powerful divine powers and unleashed their divine abilities and secret arts that blotted out the sun. Hundreds of divine powers and secret arts formed a sky full of blade auras and sword shadows. All kinds of divine beasts, meteors and light blades fell towards the divine battleship. The left emissary Jean and the blood dragon right emissary were not worried. Instead they felt inexplicably excited and expectant. Their blood was boiling. A bunch of reckless fools. It's my loss if you can break through the defenses of the divine worship. Come on. The two had already fought together many times and their actions were very coordinated. The left emissary Jean activated the divine cannons of the divine worship and bombarded the 9 groups of gods. The blood dragon right emissary activated the defensive array of the divine worship and condensed a blood-colored light shield on the surface of the divine worship. In the next moment, a series of loud bangs could be heard. The sky was full of blade auras, sword shadows, and the radiance of divine spells ruthlessly bombarded the divine worship, bursting out fragments of divine light that blotted out the sky. The blood-colored light shield on the surface of the divine worship blocked all the attacks, and there was not even a crack on it. Then sinister divine cannons extended from both sides and the bow of the divine worship, releasing destructive beams of light that bombarded the 9 groups of gods. Boom boom boom. Amidst the deafening explosions, more than 200 beams of light tore through the night sky and bombarded the gods. Half of the beams of light missed and blasted into the surrounding mountains and rivers. The mountains were blasted into ruins and deep pits and ravines were blasted into the ground. Dust flew up and covered the sky. But the other half of the beams of light landed in the midst of the 9 groups of gods. Instantly, the gods dressed in fiery red robes and armor were thrown off their feet by the beams of light, their flesh and blood splattering everywhere. All sorts of shrill screams, painful roars, and angry curses exploded in the night sky. Without a doubt, the 9 groups of gods dressed in red were the disciples of the sacred fire sect. Most of the disciples were only at the 7th to 9th level of the celestial god realm. Only the deacons leading them had the strength of a divine lord. After this round of bombardment, more than 60 of the nearly 300 sacred fire sect disciples were killed on the spot, and more than 30 were seriously injured. Even with such heavy casualties, they were still unable to intimidate them. Instead, it aroused the ferocity of the sacred fire sect disciples, making them even braver as they charged toward the divine worship without any regard for their own safety. Kill. It's that divine worship. Stop it. Tianxing must be in that divine worship. As long as we stop him, the sect master will reward us handsomely. Everyone, don't worry. I've already sent out the signal. The other teams are coming to help immediately. The sect master and a few elders are holding the line at the back. We must not embarrass the sacred fire sect. The deacons in fiery red armor shouted at the top of their lungs to boost the morale of the disciples. They led the disciples in a charge, using their ultimate killing moves with all their might. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Divine spell light covered the sky and poured down like a flood, drowning Lin Shui's worship. The divine worship circled in the night sky, constantly adjusting its angle. The divine cannons shot out beams of divine power at the sacred fire sect disciples. Bam, 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 bam. Countless divine spell light blasted the divine worship, creating deafening explosions. The divine worship trembled from the bombardment, and the blood-red light shield rippled and cracked. However, the blood dragon of the right kept controlling the array to repair the light shield's cracks and replenish its divine power. On the other side, another half of the hundreds of beams of light from the divine cannons hit the sacred fire sect disciples. Along with a series of muffled rumbling noises, dazzling divine light blossomed from the crowd once again, and a rain of blood and corpses splashed all over the sky. In the blink of an eye, dozens of sacred fire sect disciples were blasted into nothingness by the divine cannons. The two sides went back and forth, exchanging 5 rounds in 10 breaths. When the sacred fire sect disciples rushed to the divine worship, 80% of them were dead or injured. Only about 50 people were still alive. The divine worship was unscathed. However, the blood-red light shield was full of cracks and its power had weakened. But, before the blood dragon of the right could repair the light shield, Xing Wuyin and the 4 sacred fire sect elders had rushed to the divine worship and attacked. In the night sky, more than a dozen teams had received the signal and were rushing over at lightning speed. A moment later, the divine worship was surrounded by the sacred fire sect. Chapter 31:10. Heavenly Wind Dragon Saber. 9 Revolution Star Fall. Red Flame Sacred Fire Badge. Xing Wuyin and the 4 elders attacked the divine worship 100 miles away with their ultimate techniques. The 100-mile-long saber light, the earth-shattering saber light, and the mountain-sized Abijna light illuminated an area of a few hundred miles. A peerlessly terrifying wave of divine power, carrying with it the power to destroy everything, viciously struck the divine worship that was circling in the air. Bam, 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 father, father. First there was a dull explosion. The divine worship was drowned by the 5-colored divine light. It swayed left and right on the verge of collapse. Then the blood-red light shield protecting the divine worship was blasted into pieces. The blood-colored light shards fell from the sky. The divine worship was also sent flying, crashing into the ruins 100 miles away. At this critical moment, left emissary Jin could no longer use the divine cannon to attack the sacred fire sect disciples. He quickly helped the blood dragon emissary of the right to control the array to stabilize the divine worship. Just before it fell into the ruins, the divine worship finally stabilized and stopped in the night sky. Left emissary Jin and the blood dragon emissary of the right heaved a sigh of relief. Phew. At least it didn't fall to the ground. A few upper-level divine lords attacked. Otherwise it wouldn't be like this. Damn it. That group of people came prepared and specifically came to kill us. We can't deal with them. We can only inform the sect leader and young master Tianxing. In an instant the two communicated with their divine wills and decided to ask Lin Shuer and Ji Tianxing to help. But just as left emissary Jin was about to wake them up, he found that Ji Tianxing had already left the divine worship and appeared in the night sky. When the divine worship was attacked and Xing Wuyin and the 4 elders appeared, Ji Tianxing had already sensed them. Zhoush. He left the divine worship in a flash and stood proudly in the night sky. He looked to the south and saw Xing Wuyin and 4 elders in fiery red armor in the night sky 100 miles away. He looked at them expressionlessly and stared at the insignia on their robes for a moment. Who are you? His face was dignified as he asked in a low voice. While he was sizing up the other party, Xing Wuyin and the others were also sizing him up. The middle-aged elder with a mustache even took out a portrait and compared it with Ji Tianxing. After taking a closer look, the bearded elder nodded to Xing Wuyin and transmitted his voice. Sect Master, we made the right bet. It's him. The mustached elder's tone was filled with unconcealable surprise and excitement. Xing Wuyin slightly nodded, his sharp eyes fixed on Ji Tianxing as he sneered. You're indeed worthy of being the #1 genius of the Bloodfire Divine Country. You're really in high spirits. Tianxing, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Ji Tianxing frowned slightly as a cold light flashed in his eyes. You're Prince Lian's lackeys? Are you here on orders to kill me? Xing Wuyin did not get angry. Instead he sneered and said, You're not that stupid after all. That's right, I'm the sect master of the Sacred Fire sect. I've mobilized the entire sect to kill you. It can't be helped. Who asked you to be so blind as to offend the young prince? Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said contemptuously, Sacred Fire sect? I've only heard of the top forces like the Surging Waves Palace, the 7 Stars sect and the Dual Blades sect. What Sacred Fire sect? Must be a small, insignificant force. Ji Tianxing said it casually, but he did not know that his words had dealt a critical blow to Xing Wuyin and the rest. Especially the 4 elders. They were so ashamed and angry that they were trembling and almost vomiting blood. Bolsh **. What kind of top force is the Surging Waves Palace? Our Sacred Fire sect is as famous as the Surging Waves Palace. If you haven't heard of it, it can only mean that you're ignorant. Brat, it's useless for you to have a sharp tongue. I'm going to tear you into pieces. The 4 elders were furious and they cursed with murderous intent. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a playful smile as he vaguely understood something. He looked around and saw more than 50 Sacred Fire sect disciples in a sorry state. Further away in the night sky, there were more than a dozen teams rushing over from all directions. Finally, his gaze fell on Xing Wuyin and the rest. He sneered contemptuously. Since you're Prince Lian's lackeys, you should know what happened to the Heavenly Union sect. To be honest, you little cats and dogs dare to come and kill me? I really admire your courage. Seeing that you're young and ignorant, I'll give you one chance. Back down obediently now and I can spare your lives. These words were undoubtedly a great insult to Xing Wuyin and the rest. The four elders were even more ashamed and resentful. Murderous intent surged from their bodies, and their eyes were dyed with a layer of blood. Xing Wuyin sneered even more mockingly. Brat, stop bluffing. You're so tough on the outside but weak on the inside. Do you still want to hide from my fiery eyes of truth? You've been seriously injured in the battle with the Heavenly Union sect. You're just an empty shell now. You can't even withstand a single blow. The four elders also sneered and reprimanded and humiliated him. Brat, you want to spare our lives, but we don't want to spare yours. Cut the crap. Kneel down and accept your death. Qianxia, I really want to thank you for being the stepping stone for our sect's rise. Little bastard, how do you want to die? Their voices echoed in the night sky, spreading for hundreds of miles. The 50 or so Sacred Fire sect disciples were also in high spirits and confidence. Seeing this, Xianxia couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Sigh. No wonder the Surging Waves Palace is one of the 7 major sects, and the Sacred Fire sect is unknown. Hearing this, the four elders were stunned. The bearded elder's face was gloomy and he asked in a cold voice, Brat, what do you mean? Xianxia couldn't help but roll his eyes. With your intelligence and ability, you want to revive the Sacred Fire sect? What a fool's dream. Xing Wuyin and the four elders were enraged. They couldn't hold back their murderous intent anymore and attacked in anger. Brat, you're courting death. I'm going to kill you. If I don't cut you into pieces, how can I vent my anger? As they roared, Xing Wuyin and the four elders used all their strength and used their ultimate killing moves. Heaven Lamenting Sacred Fire Blade. Xing Wuyin roared and released endless sacred fire, forming a giant blade that was 100 miles long and slashing at Xianxia. The moment the sacred fire blade appeared, the night sky was lit up, and the air was burned to nothing. The four elders also used their trump cards, releasing destructive divine art light shadows. Xianxia remained calm in the face of the siege of 5 high-level divine lords. He unhurriedly drew his Heaven's Burial Sword and waved it to counterattack. Daylight Sword. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. He punched out with his left fist, creating a mountain-sized dragon elephant phantom that smashed at the four elders. He waved the Burial of Heaven with his right hand, creating a blazing golden halo that was like the sun in the sky. At the same time, Lin Shuer and Blood Illusion appeared in the night sky, helping Xianxia to counterattack Xing Wuyin and the others. Sword Piercing the 9 Heavens. Chapter 31:11. Kaboom! The dark golden sun with a radius of 100 miles collided with the Heaven Sorrow Sacred Fire Saber, creating a thunderous sound. This was a head-on confrontation between Xianxia and Xing Wuyin, a head-on collision with all their might. The people of Sacred Fire sect all thought that Xing Wuyin would definitely gain the upper hand. Even if he couldn't kill Xianxia, he could at least severely injure him and force him to retreat. After all, Xing Wuyin was an 8th-level Divine Lord expert and his strength was very strong. And Xianxia was so young and his strength was unknown. Moreover, he had just fought a great battle with Heavenly Sect and must be seriously injured. What reason did Xing Wuyin have to lose? However, the final result left everyone dumbfounded. They revealed an incomparably shocked expression. The Golden Sun and Heaven Sorrow Sacred Fire Saber collapsed at the same time, bursting out golden light and sacred fire that blotted out the sky. However, that incomparably powerful strength chi sent Xing Wuyin flying hundreds of kilometers away, crashing into the ruins of a collapsed mountain. Not only did he end up with a dusty face, but when he crawled out of the ruins, there was a lot of blood flowing out of his mouth and nose. Obviously, he was at a disadvantage in the clash and his internal organs were injured. The disciples of Sacred Fire sect were shocked to see this scene and their confidence was severely damaged. Everyone couldn't help but have the same thought in their minds. Didn't they say that Xianxia was seriously injured? Why doesn't he look injured at all? Sect Master is so strong but he can't beat Xianxia? Can we really kill him? Originally, the disciples of Sacred Fire sect were full of confidence and confidence. Now that their confidence was severely damaged and their aura weakened rapidly, their combat power was of course greatly reduced. Especially the four elders, they were the most affected. Ji Tianxing's strong strength and domineering aura cast a shadow over their hearts. Lin Shui and Sir God Blood Illusion attacked fiercely, and the four of them were forced to retreat without any strength to fight back. The two sides had only exchanged a few moves, but two elders had already been injured by the blood blade. One of their arms and one of their legs were cut off, and their blood scattered into the night sky. When the other two elders saw this scene, they were terrified. When they made their moves, they were hesitant and did not dare to fight with their lives on the line. Of course, their battle prowess was greatly reduced. As such, Shui Lin and Sir God Blood Illusion became even more ferocious, beating the four elders until they fled in a sorry state. Fortunately, more than 10 teams of Sacred Fire sect disciples arrived in time. More than 500 disciples, led by 18 deacons, surrounded Ji Tianxing, Shui Lin, Sir God Blood Illusion and the divine ship. They launched an aggressive siege. The battlefield had shrunk to a radius of about 100 miles. The divine battleships could not be fully deployed, and it was easy for them to accidentally injure their own people. Therefore Shui Lin put away the godly battleship. Zhen Hong, the left emissary Jin, and the Blood Dragon right emissary rushed out and attacked the disciples of the Sacred Fire sect with murderous intent. Not only that, Ji Tianxing also opened the Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and released 2 divine beasts. Roar. An earth-shattering dragon roar tore through the night sky. The black dragon appeared with a torrent of black water. It pounced into the crowd ferociously and started a massacre. Swish, 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 swish. The moment Qian Yu appeared, its mountain-sized body released thousands of icicles that shot in all directions. Before this, Qian Yu and the Black Dragon had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime. Not long ago they had broken through to the Sir God realm almost at the same time, and their powers had increased by several times. Now that their divine path foundations were stable, they could not hold back and were eager to find an opportunity to test their skills. Therefore, the moment they appeared, they gave it their all and stirred up a storm in the night sky. One sword light chills 19 states. At this moment, a clear roar was heard and a ball of blazing white light appeared. Dressed in white, Bai Long's silver hair fluttered in the wind. He held the Source Stone Divine Sword in his right hand and stood in the night sky. Under the night sky, divine light shone on him, giving him an extraordinary temperament, as though he was a peerless sword master. But in the next moment his extraordinary temperament was destroyed. More than 100 disciples of the Sacred Fire sect joined forces and unleashed their Abhijna light shadows that blotted out the sky. He was instantly filled with anger and cursed, "You little trash who don't know what's good for you. Watch how I deal with you." Bai Long used his teleportation divine ability and moved 10 miles away, narrowly avoiding the divine light shadows that filled the sky. Then he let out a dragon roar that could pierce through metal and stone. He transformed into a 1,000-foot-long lightning dragon and pounced into the crowd. Bam, 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 bam. The lightning flashing by Long wreaked havoc in the crowd, creating a terrifying hurricane that swept up countless broken limbs and corpses. A series of muffled sounds exploded, reverberating in the night sky. Just the 2 divine beasts and Bai Long had caused chaos and violence within a 300-mile radius. The Heavenly God Realm's Sacred Fire sect disciples were extremely weak and could not withstand a single blow. Like wheat being reaped, they fell one after another and were smashed into pieces. Countless pieces of flesh and blood were thrown out. In addition to the fierce attacks of Zhen Hong left emissary Jin and Blood Dragon right emissary, the 500 Sacred Fire sect disciples found it even harder to resist and soon suffered heavy casualties. On the other side, Ji Tianxing and Xing Wuyin had exchanged more than a dozen blows and the outcome had already been decided. Xing Wuyin's outcome was very tragic. Not only were his clothes tattered and his body covered in blood, but his hair was also messy and his face was dirty. His internal organs and meridians had suffered heavy injuries, and they had long since ruptured inch by inch. Even a dozen of his divine bones had been broken. He breathed heavily and blood kept coming out of his nose and mouth. His entire face was a mess of flesh and blood. His divine power was rapidly weakening and his combat power had also greatly decreased. At this time, Ji Tianxing's aura surged like a rainbow as he used his ultimate killer move, Galaxy River Break. Swish. Endless starlight formed a giant blade and slashed at Xing Wuyin with a power that could destroy everything. Before the blade of light arrived, Xing Wuyin's divine soul had already been locked and he felt a strong sense of danger. The surrounding space also seemed to have frozen, making it difficult for him to move. Under such circumstances he had no chance to dodge at all and could only block with all his might. Sky melting Saint Fire. Xing Wuyin shouted angrily as endless Saint Fire burst out of his body and surrounded him, forming an indestructible fire shield. At the same time he held the divine sword above his head with both hands and resisted the attack of the starlight blade. Kaboom! In the next moment, a thunderous boom exploded in the night sky. The starlight blade that was more than 10,000 feet long hit the Saint Fire shield. The Saint Fire shield that was more than 10,000 feet in radius was immediately smashed into pieces and sparks flew all over the sky. There was also a dark red divine saber mixed in with the fragments of the flames. Apparently, Xing Wuyin's divine sword had been knocked away and his shield had been shattered. He was immediately split in half from head to toe by the starlight blade. The two halves of the divine body fell into the night sky and spurted out divine blood all over the sky. Xing Wuyin's divine body was destroyed by Ji Tianxing just like that. Countless disciples of the Sacred Fire sect revealed looks of shock and horror when they saw this scene. Their hearts instantly turned cold. Chapter 31:12. Xing Wuyin had always been the spiritual leader of the Sacred Fire sect. Not only was he the founder of the Sacred Fire sect, but he was also the strongest. All the disciples admired and revered him greatly. So when he gave the order to search for and attack Ji Tianxing, the disciples of the Sacred Fire sect immediately followed him. Many disciples gladly accepted the order and charged forward without any regard for their own safety. However, Xing Wuyin's performance was beyond everyone's expectations and disappointed the disciples of the Sacred Fire sect. He had only exchanged a few moves with Ji Tianxing, but he had already been seriously injured and his divine body was destroyed. He was too weak, wasn't he? The difference in strength between him and Ji Tianxing was so big. Everyone found it hard to believe and they were shocked. The battlefield was silent for a moment and the disciples of the Sacred Fire sect were stunned. When they came back to their senses, they roared in pain and anger or exclaimed in disbelief. In an instant, the combat power of the disciples of the Sacred Fire sect decreased sharply and their morale plummeted. They had already been slaughtered by Zhenhong, Black Dragon, Qian Yu and the others and they had suffered heavy casualties. After the heavy blow of Xing Wuyin's divine body being destroyed, the disciples were immediately defeated and ran away. Zhenhong left emissary Jin, White Dragon and the others took the opportunity to kill the disciples of the Sacred Fire sect. Xuelin and Sir God Blood Illusion also became more ferocious, injuring the four elders severely. They covered their heads and fled like rats. As for Xing Wuyin, his fate was already sealed. After his divine body was destroyed, his godhead quickly went into the ground and tried to escape from the god-bearing mountain range. The sky had been blocked by Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui and the others. He could not escape at all. Only by traveling through the ground could he survive. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing had been staring at him the entire time. How could he possibly let him escape? Break the 8 barons. Ji Tianxing shouted coldly. He formed a divine art with both hands and manipulated the law of earth to perform a divine skill. Crack. The ruins within a radius of 1,000 miles instantly split into a few wide gullies, dividing the ruins into 8 pieces. Xing Wuyin's escape route was cut off, blocked by 2 huge ravines. Before he could turn around and run away, the boundless power of the earth condensed into a giant palm with a radius of 100 miles and suddenly closed in. Shua. The dark yellow giant grasped his godhead and flew out from the ground. As the giant palm flew into the sky, it continued to shrink and condense. When it arrived in front of Ji Tianxing, the huge palm had already shrunk to a radius of 3,000 feet. At the same time, the dark yellow soil and stone had condensed to the limit, turning into a translucent golden color. That was the sign of the laws of the earth being condensed to the limit. A dark red godhead wreathed in blazing holy flames was struggling desperately in the giant palm. Without another word, Ji Tianxing controlled the giant palm to crush the godhead. Cracking sounds rang out as Xing Wuyin's godhead was crushed on the spot. An 8th stage realm upper divine monarch, a strong practitioner who had been famous for 10,000 years, had fallen just like that. Xing didn't even have the chance to admit defeat and beg for mercy before he was killed by Ji Tianxing. Of course, Ji Tianxing had given him a chance to live previously, but he didn't cherish it. Now that he had fallen into Ji Tianxing's hands, Ji Tianxing didn't waste any time and killed him directly. Shwa shwa shwa. The golden giant palm dissipated, and the 9 pieces of Godhead fragments flew to Ji Tianxing, who kept them in his interspatial ring. Not far away, the 4 elders and many sacred fire sect disciples witnessed this scene with their own eyes. Instantly, everyone revealed a horrified expression, and their eyes were filled with horror. Our sect master has fallen. Heavens! Our sect master has actually been killed. Damn you, Tianxing, we'll fight it out with you. Avenge our sect master. Everyone, don't be rash. Preserving your strength is the most important thing. The night sky was filled with the cries and shouts of the sacred fire sect disciples. Everyone was filled with grief and indignation. Many disciples were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They subconsciously charged at Ji Tianxing, wanting to avenge Xing. However, more people were filled with horror, and they didn't even have the courage to take action. They were trembling with fear, and the thought of retreating rose in their hearts. They couldn't help but turn around and flee. At that moment, there were more than a dozen teams that were further away, and they were rushing over to provide support. The situation was very chaotic. Many wardens and disciples couldn't make up their minds. Xing was dead, and the only ones who were qualified to give orders were the 4 elders. However, among the 4 elders, 2 of them had already been killed by Lin Shui and Sir God Blood Illusion, and the Godhead fragments were still scattered on the battlefield. The 2 elders who were lucky enough to survive were seriously injured, and they couldn't even take care of themselves. They tried their best to hold on, but they couldn't drag it on for long. Eventually they couldn't escape death. Very soon more than a dozen teams of Sacred Fire Sect disciples arrived one after another, and they rushed into the battlefield with murderous intent. Zhen Hong left emissary Jin, Bai Long and the rest were besieged by the Sacred Fire Sect disciples, and an intense fight broke out. The Sacred Fire Sect disciples, who were seriously injured and in a sorry state, were suddenly caught in a dilemma. They had witnessed their sect leader being killed with their own eyes, and they had witnessed Ji Tianxing's valiant power. They didn't want to stay a moment longer, and they only wanted to escape from the battlefield. However, hundreds of reinforcements had just arrived and they were imposing. If they were to escape in a sorry state, what would happen to the hundreds of disciples? After hesitating and struggling for a while, a few wardens finally came up with a countermeasure. We have already fought a battle and everyone is injured. We have used up a lot of our divine power. Since the reinforcements have arrived, let them fight first. Let's recuperate for a while. The warden's orders were approved by more than 100 disciples who were lucky enough to survive. Everyone retreated to the edge of the battlefield, and as they observed the situation on the battlefield, they circulated their powers to heal their wounds. These people were very cunning and they all had the same idea. If the reinforcements were strong enough to defeat Ji Tianxing and the rest, then they would join the battle. If the reinforcements couldn't withstand a single blow, then they would act according to the situation, and be prepared to escape at any time. After Ji Tianxing killed Xing, he teleported to Lin Shui's side. He teamed up with Lin Shui and Sir God Blood Illusion to deal with the 2 elders who were lucky enough to survive. The 2 elders were already seriously injured and their fighting power was weak. The moment he attacked, he decided the outcome of the battle with one punch. Both sides only exchanged 3 blows and the 2 elders were killed on the spot. Not only were their bodies smashed to pieces, their godheads were also shattered into pieces. After dealing with the 4 elders, Ji Tianxing led Lin Shui and Sir God Blood Illusion to the last battlefield. This battlefield had the most people and it had the most momentum and commotion. More than 700 Sacred Fire Sect disciples were attacking Zhen Hong. Bai Long left emissary Jin and the rest with all their might. Black Dragon and Qianyu also revealed their true forms that were 100 miles long, and they fought fiercely in the night sky. Originally both sides were evenly matched. But as Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui and Sir God Blood Illusion joined the battle became a one-sided massacre. Especially Ji Tianxing and Lin Shui. They turned into 2 golden and blood-red hurricanes of death, and they swept across the battlefield wantonly. Everywhere they went, all obstacles were crushed. They were really invincible. Book Guest House Reading Website.